Chapter 51. In an elegant study room. Lena gently put down the microphone in her hand and returned it to its original position. She had just received a response from Meteor City. She opened the drawer beside her and took out a piece of paper. Sunlight streamed across the desk, casting the words clearly into view. In the dusty leaves of the month, the most cherished treasure rises and falls in your mind. Darkness is slowly approaching. Half of it is possession, and half of it is loss. Please consider the consequences of acting on your own. You can go to the dark feast in the east, where the goodwill of the prophet and endless possibilities await. Be cautious of young men who look like gods, but do not ignore them. The gorgeous and sharp flying blade is both an invitation from the gods and an inevitable disaster. After studying it in silence, Lena gently unfolded the paper. It seemed he hadn't seen the message clearly earlier because two sheets were overlapping. He was now holding a second, identically sized paper with entirely different text. The first had been her prophecy poem. This one belonged to her daughter. Eliza, it's up to you from now on. Looking at the words on the second prophecy, Lena couldn't help murmuring softly. Meanwhile, 4 hours had passed since Chaos and his group departed from Meteor City, making their way to Windmill Town. As evening approached, the setting sun cast its last rays upon the lakeside town. The shimmering water and gently rotating windmills created a peaceful, serene scene. This place is beautiful. The world outside. Tulu looked out the window and laughed. He had spent over a decade seeing only the rundown surroundings of Meteor City. Now, gazing upon this tranquil scenery, a wave of joy and comfort welled up in his heart. Hearing him, Chaos paused from knotting a cord with his fingers. He turned slightly, glancing at the view. "I agree," the young man murmured with a faint smile, quietly admiring the scenery drifting past the car window. It was indeed a pleasant thing to keep moving forward and occasionally stop to appreciate the journey. The scenery along the road blurred past, and before long, they arrived at a manor. Outside the closed iron gate, Gliss brought the vehicle to a halt and picked up his phone. After a brief conversation, he ended the call. Not half a minute later, an old man appeared. Though his pace seemed slow, he moved with surprising speed. A third-rate Nen user, Chaos assessed quickly, but clearly skilled enough to create such a misleading illusion with his steps. Gliss stepped out of the vehicle to speak with the man, but Chaos remained inside. He knew he'd need to drive back in soon, so he stayed observant and silent. Tokens were exchanged. Identities confirmed. Everything was in order. So, this is what the employer with the prophecy poem meant, Chaos thought, noting Gliss's self-introduction and the smile the old man, Moken, gave him in return. The thought passed through his mind, then quickly faded. It wasn't worth lingering on. After the brief conversation, Moken climbed into the passenger seat at Gliss's invitation. As soon as he sat down, Chaos spoke. "Old man, lead us to where your young lady is." Chaos didn't bother with pleasantries. He preferred getting to the point. Prophecies, goodwill, full mission authority. These things told Chaos he held the advantage in this operation. Idle chatter was unnecessary unless it served a purpose. Moken was taken aback for a moment but quickly recovered. "Understood, Mr. Chaos." Lena, their employer, had mentioned that everything would be arranged by a handsome young man. Moken had planned to chat a bit on the drive. Small talk is a social nicety, useful for building rapport and understanding. But clearly, this wasn't the time. Next to him, Gliss got back in the car and started driving, filled with quiet existential confusion. He remembered how, on past missions, he'd always been the one following someone else's lead. Why was it so different when Chaos was involved? Forget about Ukexin City, sure, Chaos had been hired by the teen's family there. But now? Wait. Miss? Could this be another woman in Chaos's life? The thought made Gliss click his tongue inwardly. As expected, handsome people really are popular everywhere they go. Damn it. Despite the drama unfolding in his mind, Gliss kept a straight face and drove calmly under Moken's guidance. Behind them, the iron gate was closed by a servant. There were quite a few staff around, even when the family wasn't present. An old butler like Moken likely came out personally as a sign of respect. Chaos didn't care about formalities, but now that someone was officially receiving them, he began issuing instructions to avoid having to repeat himself later. Along the way, their discussion was brief but effective. Old man, by tomorrow morning, I want 2 experienced, highly skilled drivers ready, and 2 cars prepped. Understood, Mr. Chaos. We'll be staying the night. Prepare 3 rooms near your young lady's quarters. Yes, Mr. Chaos. Given their condition, he sent Tulu and Gliss to rest. Ever since arriving at the manor, a sense of danger had lingered. The prophecy likely suggested things would proceed smoothly with them around, but that didn't mean he could afford to let his guard down. If he placed too much faith in the prophecy, he might inadvertently disrupt it by changing his behavior. It was like a nesting doll, layers upon layers of uncertainty. Chaos couldn't be sure whether knowing the prophecy would subconsciously alter his choices, leaving him vulnerable. So, best to follow his instincts and prepare for everything. That was his approach to missions. In short, complacency was not an option. As he casually observed the landscaping, Chaos strolled into the garden. He sensed no threats. Just a faint presence, oddly gentle. Taking in the fresh air, Chaos approached a young girl sitting nearby. In the garden, the young man in a black suit stood with his hands in his pockets, silently gazing at the delicate profile of the girl before him. Then, his eyes drifted to the wheelchair she sat in. She can't walk. The difficulty of this mission just increased. Chapter 52. Chaos's footsteps were nearly silent, just as he preferred. Rustle. The girl in the wheelchair, seemingly just an ordinary child, was unaware of the silent visitor. She held a book delicately in her slender left hand, having just finished a page. She raised her right hand to turn it, the soft flick of paper the only sound. Her silver hair was adorned with gold-threaded ornaments, and her flawless, porcelain face glowed in the light of the setting sun. At this moment, she resembled a fallen angel from another world. She looked ethereal, so beautiful, she hardly seemed real. Without disturbing her, Chaos quietly turned away, leaving her immersed in her reading. The properties of particles in an Nen field: manipulation, concealment, hunting. Using these 3 familiar Nen abilities, Chaos had developed a detection thread system. It was imperceptible to the touch and could only react to those with Nen. His retreat had a purpose: stronger protection. 10 minutes later, Chaos returned after installing these near-invisible threads throughout critical points of the manor. From what the prophecy suggested and from his own intuition, it was clear the likelihood of an enemy attack would sharply rise from now on. Thus, he laid out a few simple tactical plans. 1. Avoid traveling at night. In the darkness, they would be at a serious disadvantage. They were visible, while their enemies would not be. This was why they chose to stay the night. 2. From now until sundown, Chaos would personally guard the target. The other 2, Tulu and Gliss, were free to rest or eat within the manor but needed to remain combat ready. That night, they would take turns on watch. This ensured that 2 Nen users could rest well while the third stayed alert and vigilant at all times. 3. Matters like selecting drivers still needed consideration. Although Gliss was primarily a fighter, even a minor improvement in his focus could prove worthwhile. The moment Chaos returned to the garden, he noticed a carpet had been laid out, now filled with an array of food. He then glanced toward the girl and the woman beside her, who was pouring tea with a gentle smile. Chaos had sensed her earlier, when she entered the area. She had already been inside the mansion and her presence didn't surprise him. The food, he assumed, had been arranged per his earlier instructions to Moken. Irish sister, ah. There was nothing abnormal about the scene. Chaos didn't dwell on the conversation. Hearing the girl's bright voice, he walked slowly toward the food-laden carpet. Even as he moved, her words revealed useful information. The woman beside the girl was a maid, perhaps more than that, a trusted family member. The joy in the girl's voice was unmistakable. Chaos didn't dwell on it. It wasn't tactically important. But his mind instinctively made note of the detail, his awareness constantly processing the scene around him. Without any greeting, Chaos sat cross-legged on the carpet and began eating. He moved quickly, efficiently, and precisely. The sound of a fork clinking against the porcelain plate drew the girl's attention. She turned to see a stranger, Chaos, sitting nearby. Yet, rather than panicking, she simply froze, then quickly composed herself. Tian Nai blinked and said, "Hello. You're the bodyguard my dad mentioned, right? The one who's here to protect me when I go see him." Chaos had just bitten into a piece of sausage. He raised his head slightly and gave her a small nod. At that moment, the woman the girl had called Sister Ireland also reacted. She turned to the girl and said, "Miss Eliza, this is Mr. Chaos. He's the security consultant the master hired, just as you said." She was formal and respectful. After speaking to Eliza, she turned to Chaos and bowed slightly. "I apologize, Mr. Chaos. I didn't notice your arrival. I should have greeted you properly." "There's no need to apologize," Chaos replied calmly. "I didn't exactly announce myself." While Ireland spoke, Chaos had already finished a large cut of tenderloin. He swallowed and replied with minimal effort. Ireland was simply following her grandfather Moken's instructions to show proper courtesy. Realizing Chaos wasn't one for small talk, she wisely ended the conversation there. Eliza, however, smiled sweetly and said, just like Sister Ireland said, "My name is Eliza." "Eliza, sir. You can just call me Eliza. Nice to meet you." She tilted her head slightly. "Oh, and Chaos? Can I call you that?" Chaos, still chewing, looked up at her amber eyes and nodded. He expected her to continue chatting, but the silence that followed felt unusual. He glanced up again, curious. Eliza had rested her chin on her hands and was watching him. When she noticed his gaze, she seemed to realize what he was thinking and grinned. "Oops, sorry, Chaos. I interrupted your meal, didn't I?" Before he could answer, she tilted her head again and said brightly, "I'll wait until you're done eating." Her cheerful, considerate response actually brought a faint smile to Chaos's lips. "Eliza," he said softly. "Nice to meet you, too." "Yes. Now eat, Chaos," she replied, nodding with enthusiasm. Without another word, Chaos resumed eating. 15 minutes later, Ireland cleared away the empty dishes with a food cart and left. Chaos walked to a small table beside Eliza, took a sip of black tea, and set the white porcelain cup down again. His gaze happened to fall on a book resting nearby. The cover was decorated with intricate patterns resembling a magic circle. The title read, "The Young Pope." "Chaos looks just like Dad said, so beautiful." Eliza's voice came just then. "Usually, handsome is the term people use for men," Chaos responded mildly, turning toward her. He was standing, so Eliza had to look up. Her amber eyes looked puzzled. "But Chaos is obviously as beautiful as me." "You have a very confident opinion of yourself," Chaos said with mild amusement, brushing past her comment. He was a little surprised. For such a young girl, she certainly had no hesitation praising herself. "Sister Ireland says it. Grandpa Moken says it. Dad says it too. Now Chaos is saying it. I'm not being narcissistic." Eliza grinned mischievously. Chapter 53. Oh, Chaos must be super powerful, right? An innocent question, spoken with pure curiosity. Eliza seemed to say whatever crossed her mind. There was no urgency, no hint of manipulation in her voice. She spoke as if chatting with an old friend. First of all, you used the word must, which implies you've already made a judgment. Second, I don't know what super powerful means in your terms. Chaos hesitated for a moment before answering, watching the girl beside him lift her index finger and look up at him with hopeful eyes. He didn't mind talking with her. In fact, he found himself speaking more than usual. Has anyone ever told you that you're serious and meticulous? Eliza tilted her head slightly, her eyes still locked on him. You're the first, Chaos replied, sipping his black tea before turning his gaze to the setting sun. Wait, Chaos doesn't have any friends? Eliza looked genuinely surprised. I have a friend, but he's not very good at compliments. Then you need a friend who is, she said brightly, extending a small, pale hand toward him with a beaming smile. I don't mind talking to you, Chaos said evenly, but being friends? That's not going to happen. To Chaos, they were from different worlds. He didn't have the time, or interest, to form a friendship with a sheltered girl who knew nothing of the real world. They got along only because Chaos appreciated beauty. That was it. She was a girl with an angelic face and an innocent nature, nothing more. Why? Eliza asked with childlike confusion, showing no trace of embarrassment at being rejected. There's no reason. If I had to give one. Our lives only intersect this once. It doesn't matter whether we become friends or not. He set down the porcelain cup, picked up the ruby-colored teapot, and poured himself another cup of tea. Snap. A crisp sound broke the air. Eliza had snapped her fingers. So basically, chaos means we're from different worlds, she said, pointing a finger to her chin, head tilted in thought. But she shifted her posture, resting her chin on her hand and fixing him with an unblinking stare, her amber eyes shining. In Eliza's understanding, we are from the same world. What do you mean? Chaos was intrigued. Dad is a mafia boss. I'm the mafia boss's daughter. We're both members of the gray underworld. Since Chaos was hired as a bodyguard by the same type of people, that means. As a security consultant, you've obviously worked with underworld groups before, so you're part of that world too. She tilted her head again as if it were a habit. Chaos was surprised by her logic. Before I answer that, he said, how about you answer a few of my questions first? Eliza's logic was sharp, her self-awareness clear. She might have been physically confined to a manor, but her mind wasn't. Nope. You have to answer Eliza's question first. That's good manners. This question determines whether you're qualified to be my friend. You still want me to answer first? Chaos smiled slightly, watching for her reaction. He was testing her, testing this young lady who was far more complex than he had expected. Then go ahead, Chaos. Eliza's the one who brought it up, after all. Her perception was razor sharp. From his appearance to the flow of their conversation, she picked up on everything. Usually, when someone hears friendship qualifications, they'd scoff or get offended, but Eliza didn't flinch. She didn't treat it like a social competition. She wasn't trying to win him over, she simply wanted to be his friend. Her way of thinking was unlike anyone else's he'd met. The rare desire to understand someone completely stirred in Chaos. And once that thought took hold, he acted on it. First question, he began, raising an index finger. All that stuff about gangs and the underworld, did you learn it all from books? Yup. Eliza nodded. Eliza has trouble moving around, so she's always stayed here in the manor. Just as he'd suspected. She was like a greenhouse flower, innocent, untouched. But the way she conversed, so aware and composed, showed a depth he hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just repeating what she'd read, she understood it. Her answers were like those of an outsider who'd analyzed the world objectively and then responded based on careful evaluation. Objective cognition. Chaos pressed on. Next question, what's your opinion of the Mafia, the gray organization you mentioned? Eliza raised her index finger again, tapping her cheek thoughtfully. A bunch of bad people who do bad things for selfish reasons. Simple. Accurate. Then your father is the head of such a group, Chaos said, letting the sentence trail off. He knew Ireland had overheard it too. Of course, he's a bad guy, Eliza answered plainly, tilting her head and blinking. Her eyes seemed to say, isn't that obvious? You really are from the same world as me, Eliza, Chaos chuckled softly. He didn't ask anything else. He'd already confirmed it. This Mafia heiress was unlike anyone he'd encountered. Her personality aside, the fact that she could read and interpret the world objectively, without bias, made her exceptional. If she ever awakened to Nen, and used that clarity of mind to develop an ability for analyzing people or creatures she'd never encountered before, there would undoubtedly be many interesting intersections between them in the future. Since Chaos says we're from the same world, Eliza grinned sweetly, then we're friends. She looked like a little girl who'd just been handed candy. Chaos knew she was twisting his words. But he didn't call her out on it. His thinking was simple. If she could be helpful, and he didn't mind her company, then having one more friend wasn't a bad thing. With that, he gave her a quiet nod. Chapter 54. Hey, Chaos, you never actually answered your friend Eliza's original question. Eliza had already claimed the role of friend without hesitation. Chaos raised an eyebrow. You're asking if I'm really that powerful? Yeah. Eliza nodded eagerly, eyes sparkling. A little, Chaos said after a pause, answering with objective understatement. Eliza pouted slightly. Well, if Dad invited Chaos here, you must be stronger than Grandpa Moken. Grandpa Moken can even break bricks thrown at him. She waved her hands enthusiastically to demonstrate, her expression growing serious. Chaos was amused by her dramatic reenactment. His dark eyes filled with subtle mirth. So, Eliza thinks breaking bricks is impressive? Isn't it? Eliza tilted her head. Grandpa Moken said he could reach the 200th floor of the Sky Arena. Oh. Chaos, do you know the Sky Arena? At that, her excitement visibly surged. That's the holy place where fighters from all over the world gather. I watch the arena broadcasts every single day. And. She became increasingly animated, words tumbling out faster. At that moment, Chaos gently pressed a hand to the top of her head, cutting off the momentum before she spiraled out of control. He bent slightly to meet her gaze. Let's take it one topic at a time. Don't worry, we have plenty of time. Eliza's voice shrank to a whisper, barely audible. As she looked up at the boy in front of her, calm and gentle, her face began to flush for reasons she didn't understand. Her head felt hot, too. Eyes darting nervously, she finally settled on the braided strand of hair hanging beside her ear, twined with golden thread. She began twisting it absent-mindedly between her fingers. Chaos noticed her reaction and hesitated, briefly debating whether to press on. He could end her budding admiration in an instant, but chose not to. Miss Eliza, Mr. Chaos, what are you two doing? A surprised voice interrupted, drawing Chaos back to reality. He glanced over and saw Ireland approaching with a tray in both hands, a teapot and various exquisite desserts balanced atop it. Behind her, a servant carried a chair. What's wrong, Sister Ireland? Eliza blinked at the newcomer, confused. Ireland opened her mouth, unsure how to respond. People who just met shouldn't be this close. Right? But how was she supposed to explain that to the young lady? Grandpa Moken had told her to obey Mr. Chaos in all things, an order that came from the master himself. And the master, who adored Eliza, wouldn't have issued such a command lightly. Ireland's eyes flickered. She looked from Chaos, who was observing her calmly, to Eliza, who wore an expression of innocent curiosity. Finally, she shook her head. "It's nothing. I'm sorry, miss." Chaos said nothing, simply waited while Ireland changed the tea and placed the desserts down. After the servant set the chair across from Eliza and tactfully departed, Chaos sat down opposite her at the round table. "I thought Sister Ireland was going to scold us about what just happened," Eliza said playfully, sticking her tongue out at Chaos. Then, as if realizing she'd said something revealing, she quickly covered her mouth. "Oh?" Chaos stood and began pouring tea. "So you do know what just happened?" He had honestly believed she'd been unaware of the moment that caught Ireland off guard. That face. So deceptive. Or maybe. He glanced down at Eliza again. Somewhere along the line, this girl had earned his trust. Unlike most, she possessed sincere expectations, a bright personality, and a flawless appearance. Interesting. In barely 10 minutes, she'd made an impression that wasn't forced or superficial. Sitting back in his chair, Chaos stared at the girl across from him. "I was just teasing. But somehow this feels relaxing." "Chaos is a dummy," Eliza pouted, glaring at him. "Who touches a girl's head like that after only 10 minutes? You really think I wouldn't notice something was off?" "No excuse," Chaos said with a small smile. "I'll punish myself, with a cup of black tea." He glanced at the faint pink blush rising to her ears, then let the matter drop. "All right," he continued, sipping his tea. "Back to our original topic. You think the old man, Moken, is really strong, right?" He wanted to use this moment to explain Nen directly. Eliza was already old enough to handle the truth. And if there was even a 1 in 1,000 chance she could develop Nen abilities that aligned with his expectations, then it was worth it. To Chaos, knowledge was trivial. If it could be transformed into a useful ally, even better. He would willingly share it with anyone but his enemies. Eliza nodded as if she understood his intent, staying quiet and waiting for him to continue. "You're right," Chaos said. "In terms of physical strength, he is impressive, compared to the average person. And I assume you got that impression from books. You know, those rigorous scientific ones that estimate human strength by averages. Like, a normal person can lift between 50 to 70 kilograms. Normal people, huh?" Eliza's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "So, Chaos isn't normal?" She had zeroed in on the key point. Her tone didn't reflect shock, more like something she'd long suspected. Chaos noticed that. When someone with limited mobility hears something extraordinary, they usually respond with wonder, unless they've already believed in it. "Yes," he said at last. "There are people in the world who possess mysterious powers that the average person can't imagine." Eliza drew in a deep breath and looked down at the table. "Hey, Chaos. Is there anyone who can use the power of holy light?" "Maybe," Chaos answered, smiling softly. "It's possible." He thought of the book lying nearby, the young pope, and of Eliza's legs. He understood what she was truly asking. "I knew it," she said with a radiant smile. "I knew there had to be supernatural powers in the world." She didn't need further confirmation. Her tone said it all. It was a belief she'd held for a long time. Hey Hunters, time for a legally required break. This message was brought to you by sleep deprivation and cup noodles, skull emoji. Okay, back to your scheduled simping. Chapter 55. Thank you, Chaos, for giving me such a precious gift on the very first day we became friends. Eliza smiled sweetly, asking no further questions. The moment she finished speaking, she scratched her head with her index finger, looking troubled. What should I give in return? Her first instinct was gratitude, and reciprocity. Chaos looked at her with a flicker of surprise. Eliza, Why didn't you ask more questions? Her reaction intrigued him even further. What? She asked, clearly confused by the question. You must have wanted to know who can possess the power of holy light. Chaos prompted. It was a question she should have been dying to ask. But Chaos doesn't know, right? She replied. You inferred that from my tone, he said, pressing his lips together slightly. He recalled the uncertainty in his own voice when he had responded before. Eliza simply nodded. And what about magical power? Don't you want to learn it? If you did, maybe you could heal yourself. That's what you meant when you asked about the power of holy light, isn't it? Chaos smiled faintly. Eh? Eliza blinked in surprise. I'm just a beginner, would that really be okay? Chaos must have known about magic for a long time, but you still don't know anyone who can actually use this holy light power. She had drawn that conclusion from just a few clues. She figured out that he didn't actually know anyone with such power, and thus, didn't press further. But something about that deduction didn't sit right with Chaos. Most people, when told about a power that could heal them, would seize the chance, ask questions, cling to hope, even if the results weren't immediate. So why didn't she? No. It wasn't a lack of desire. It was simply her personality, one that others wouldn't understand, but that followed its own internal logic. That made Chaos even more curious about her. Still, he answered her question first. Whether you're a beginner or experienced, if you have the talent, you can heal yourself instantly. That said, you were right, I don't actually know anyone who uses the power of holy light. Rather, she might be the first one I know. Chaos glanced at her, smiling faintly at the thought. If Eliza were to awaken to Nen, her strong sense of cognition might develop into a perception-based ability. But judging by her fixation, she was more likely to manifest a healing-type ability driven by obsession. Either way, it would be useful. He didn't mind. If the talent is there, huh? Eliza tilted her head. So it's really uncertain. Exactly. There's no need to rush. It's not like it'll happen just by wanting it. Chaos. Eliza suddenly changed her tone into something playfully whiny. What should I do? I can't think of a good return gift. How about you help me? You do know what you want, don't you? She looked at him expectantly, her tone soft and coaxing. Chaos didn't react outwardly. It wasn't hard to guess what she was doing. She didn't want him to brush off her gratitude. As a friend, she wanted to make it count. So, how about this? Chaos said. As a return gift, answer a question I haven't fully explored, but one that's very important to me. Eliza has the broadest knowledge, she said eagerly, eyes shining. The idea of helping in her area of strength seemed to ignite her confidence. Omnipotent can be refuted philosophically, Chaos began. So what would you call a being that is nearly omnipotent? He smiled gently, but didn't wait for her answer. Because in truth, this question wasn't for Eliza to solve. It was a way to reflect, and gift her a role in his thinking. This question mattered deeply to Chaos. It tied directly to the core concept behind the Nen ability he wanted to build. Of course, he didn't expect Eliza to give him a complete answer. That wasn't the point. This was an excuse, a return gift disguised as a question. With that in mind, Chaos allowed himself to think more deeply. Up until now, he'd been focused on mastering Nen, not designing his own ability. He'd always harbored a vague desire to become a nearly omnipotent Nen user, but he hadn't shaped that dream into something concrete. Now was the time. He had the knowledge, information carried over from another world, exposure to countless powerful systems and brilliant universes. Without that knowledge, he might have become strong, but never transcendent, perhaps not even someone who could rival Isaac Netero. Netero. One of the most powerful men in the world. But Chaos did have that knowledge, and with his intellect and disposition, he would make full use of it. A Nen ability that allowed him to become whatever he desired. To fulfill every wish. To gain immortality. To acquire absolute power. That was the craving born from his awareness of the multiverse and its limitless potential. To become omnipotent, able to see all, know all, and go anywhere. But Chaos also knew something important: such a concept would carry a terrible price. So he didn't believe, even deep down, that any ability could truly make him omnipotent, and he wasn't naive enough to chase it blindly. Instead, he'd aim for something more grounded, nearly omnipotent. He believed he could achieve that. But to do so, he needed a name. A name for a Nen ability that could evolve infinitely, based on his own understanding. In Chaos's worldview, once the core concept was chosen, all future development would follow that path. If the foundation was too narrow, even his immense talent could be wasted. With his knowledge, he understood instantly what such a being would be called. At the same time, Eliza spoke clearly. God. Her answer arrived just as the word had surfaced in Chaos's own mind. Eliza smiled. Well? That was a good answer, right? The God of Light in the young Pope has opponents too, other gods. They're nearly omnipotent, but they still have to fight for belief. They can't just destroy the others at will. That's an excellent answer, Chaos said softly. It helps more than you know. In the soft light of the setting sun, the young man, one day to become a god, gave the girl across from him a rare, genuine smile. It was perfect. Chapter 56. At night, moonlight poured gently through the half-open window. Chaos, dressed in simple white pajamas, sat casually on the soft bed by the window. A faint night breeze fluttered a few strands of his black hair across his forehead. Sometimes, I can't believe I spent most of the night talking to a little girl. He murmured to himself, smiling faintly as he looked out the window, his expression serene. Clearly, he'd enjoyed it. Well then. Another pleasant day has passed. Stretching lazily, Chaos continued to gaze at the glowing moon. Slowly, his eyes deepened. It's time to develop my own Nen ability. He hadn't thought about it seriously before. His focus had always been on strengthening the fundamentals, but now that the moment had come, he couldn't let it pass. Relaxing, one arm propped under his chin, he leaned back and stared out at the garden in the moonlight, slowly falling into thought. I want to become an almost omnipotent being. So, beyond the concept of God, the prerequisite is full mastery of all 6 Nen categories. I need 100% compatibility across the board, only then can I develop limitless abilities. But, naturally, obtaining talent that isn't yours comes with an absurdly high cost. Then something occurred to him. I got inspiration from Kurapika's Emperor Time. That shows it's possible, through severe vows and restrictions, to achieve what should be impossible, even at the cost of one's lifespan. That's the value of that knowledge. But Chaos wanted more than what Kurapika achieved. He didn't just want full Nen category access and special conditions, he wanted it at all times. Only then could he freely analyze other users' Nen abilities, adapt, and integrate them without restrictions. Of course, only the foundational properties could be analyzed. Take Kurapika again, his chain jail, which forces a target into Zetsu, is a special ability, bound by strict vows. Chaos knew such an ability couldn't be copied or analyzed unless the user's conditions matched perfectly. So even if I completed the foundational phase of my God ability, I still wouldn't be able to analyze vow-bound powers. I'd only be able to study core techniques, or seemingly complex abilities built on basic systems. For example, Gepet's Shadowless Strike, it looks high level, but it's really just a variation of transformation type Nen. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Catching himself, Chaos returned to his original train of thought. In the manga, Kurapika's Emperor Time lets him fully utilize all 6 Nen types, but at a cost. He loses 1 hour of life for every second it's active. That means 100 years of life would be used up in just 10 days. The cost is brutal. But Nen abilities aren't determined by what others think is costly, they're shaped by the user's own belief and subconscious. Kurapika had long discarded fear of death. For him, giving up 100 years for 10 days was a fair exchange. If someone timid took the same vow, even without much talent, such a terrifying price would push their Nen ability far beyond its limit. The cost would balance, even surpass, raw potential. But no one like that exists, no one afraid of death yet willing to wager their life. Chaos reflected quietly. The weight of a vow isn't measured by how it appears to others, it's based on the user's own psychology and subconscious. And Chaos understood himself better than anyone. He valued life, deeply. Subconsciously, he saw life as sacred. Even though he knew of artifacts and abilities that could extend it, life still held unmatched value to him. And yet, he also possessed extraordinary courage, so great, he was willing to gamble the thing he valued most. Those afraid of death would never dare make such vows. But for someone like Kurapika, who no longer cared whether he lived or died, such a vow was not particularly heavy. The irony, Chaos noted, was that even if the ability obtained through a life-bound vow was strong, it often didn't fully reflect how precious life itself was. If it were me, I could truly bring out that value. I care deeply about my life, so by risking it, the Nen potential I unlock could be incomparable. Let's begin with Kurapika's Emperor Time as a baseline. If I were to create a similar ability, what would the cost be? He focused, grounding his thoughts. Suddenly, a soft white light began to glow from his body. Hair. When you've confirmed the ability you wish to create, infuse your Nen with that conviction. Your aura will respond. To fully unlock all 6 Nen types at once. How much of my life would I lose per second? 1 minute. Almost instantly, the answer surfaced in his mind, so seamlessly, it felt like he already knew it. It didn't even feel like Nen responding. The answer emerged as if it had always existed inside him. 1 minute per second. That was 60 times less than Kurapika's cost. Chaos understood why. It wasn't because his talent was 60 times greater. No, it was because he valued his own life 60 times more. And Nen, being inherently subjective, responded to that belief. The ability wasn't the goal, though. Emperor Time was only the template. What Chaos sought was permanent talent solidification. With Kurapika, if Emperor Time stayed active too long, it caused dizziness and exhaustion. That meant that permanently locking Nen potential at full output would come with severe consequences. Logically, it would require even more of one's lifespan to eliminate those side effects, but Chaos knew better. In Nen, instinct often imposes constraints. Take Gon's Janken. It doesn't need verbal activation, yet Gon insists on standing still and shouting the move, believing it strengthens the technique. And in doing so, it does. That shout becomes both a ritual and a restriction. But at the same time, it creates tactical advantages, forcing opponents to second-guess his intent. Every strong Nen user factors this in, how to weaponize restrictions or minimize their drawbacks. Chaos was no exception. In his case, the constant drain on lifespan wasn't a beneficial feature, it was a subconscious penalty, a terrifying cost that reinforced how precious life was to him. This made the Nen ability's condition stronger, and the cost, lower. Value life. Willingly sacrifice it. Understand the principle. Then weaponize it. With all these pieces in place, Chaos forged his unique Nen ability. Ability name, God. Type, Compound Nen, multi-type enhancement through vow-based restriction. Ability 1, God, Omnipotence. Grants 100% proficiency across all 6 Nen types. Ability 2, God, Self-Transcendence. Doubles, 200%, Transformation type proficiency, Chaos's natural affinity. Final restriction. The ability is irreversible. Lifespan flows at 10x normal speed. If Chaos would have lived to 100, he now only has 8.6 years left. The moment the ability solidified, a brilliant light radiated from Chaos's body. At the same time, in a study in Sam City, Lena sat quietly, a prophecy poem held in her hand, bathed in moonlight. The moonlight illuminated the script on the parchment. Under the autumn wind of the long moon, a sincere call echoes from afar. Unlike you, who act with pure excitement, your companions walk the path for profit. Please stay true to your original intent. This is the long climb toward godhood. Even a short journey can shed hesitation, and what belongs to God cannot be stolen. What you hope for will come. What you've awaited will open its doors freely. Chapter 57. He spread his palms. Golden energy shimmered before his dark eyes. Suddenly, Chaos clenched his fists. Hum. The golden light blazed, dazzling, radiant, like a sun blooming in the midnight dark. Perfect. Lifting his chin slightly, Chaos smiled, golden light reflected in his pupils, a look of sheer satisfaction. Chaos had always anticipated unlocking his god ability. It was the concept that had guided his entire Nen development, to elevate all of his natural potential to its limit. But the actual effect exceeded even his expectations. What surprised him most was just how fully he could now express his transformation-type abilities. Even more unexpectedly, through a brief test, he realized his control over his Nen, especially over aura shaping, had reached an extraordinary level of precision. Tap tap. Footsteps echoed outside. Then, bang. The door burst open, and a tall figure was instantly bathed in golden light. Chaos, you didn't. The voice halted. Staring at the golden glow in the room, Tulu froze mid-step. What is that? A fist glowing like the sun? The light poured from Chaos's raised hand, and Tulu instinctively squinted. He couldn't help but associate the brilliance with raw, divine power. Chaos glanced at the door, then slowly lowered his hand. The light faded. Sorry. Tulu scratched his head, finally snapping out of it. I didn't know you were just practicing your Nen. He didn't feel threatened by the immense power he'd witnessed. In his mind, Chaos had always been strong, very strong. Tulu. Chaos's voice interrupted, suddenly serious. Tulu blinked, noticing the shift in tone. Before he could ask anything, Chaos spoke again. I should be the one to apologize for using my Nen without warning you. But... He looked Tulu dead in the eye. Next time you sense something unusual and decide to investigate, engage your Ken first. Tulu nodded seriously. He understood exactly what Chaos meant. If it had been an actual threat, and he'd approached without activating Ken, he could have died instantly, even from a much weaker Nen user. It was a sobering realization. Still too inexperienced. Seeing Tulu's expression, Chaos knew the point had landed. So he moved on. I think Gliss is on guard duty now. Go get some rest. Stay sharp, you'll need your strength if anything really happens. He added, don't worry, I won't use any high-output Nen unless it's absolutely necessary. Chaos had more ability testing to do, no time for casual chat. Got it. Tulu raised his hands and headed back out. As he opened the door, Chaos turned his index finger slightly, golden thread shot from his hand and darted out the window like lightning. After a brief pause, he lifted his left hand into a knife hand position and whispered something under his breath. Whoosh! A golden blade of aura extended instantly from the edge of his palm. My talent really has been enhanced. The shadowless divine blade technique, which used to require intense concentration, now feels effortless. He watched the blade hang in the air for a moment, then looked outside toward the fluttering aura threads. With this level of proficiency, I can maintain the blade and the threads simultaneously. I'm actually comfortable juggling both. He ran a mental checklist of all his Nen abilities and noted how much had changed since developing God. First, the change in his aura's color. The golden glow wasn't an effect he'd added, it emerged automatically as part of God's visual expression. Pros and cons were clear, it was flashy. But that same flamboyance naturally imposed psychological pressure on opponents. Aesthetic, yes, but tactically effective. Second, his control over aura had improved immensely. He could now simultaneously use the shadowless divine blade and Nen threads, even though the total amount of aura he possessed hadn't increased. This alone made him vastly stronger than his former self. Third, his N field had evolved. Due to the enhancement of his transformation talent, many of the technique's usual restrictions had simply disappeared. Not only could he perform standard N, but with his specialized Nen talent at 200%, he could now create practical combat adaptations of it. He had expected this from the start. He'd known from the moment he chose to develop God that his talent alone would eventually override the usual limitations, especially in basic techniques like N or aura manipulation. These were just techniques. Boundaries only existed because I hadn't pushed hard enough. With focus and practice, even foundational Nen skills become instinct. With the oaths and limitations gone, the process became natural. All in all, a great surprise. I've saved myself a lot of time. The smile that emerged on his face was genuine. Hands behind his head, Chaos leaned back into the soft bed. Now, it was time to think about what came next, the expansion of God. He stared up at the ceiling, organizing his thoughts. God. A powerful foundational ability, one designed to support limitless future development. It would only grow stronger with time, but time was precisely what he didn't have. That was its hidden constraint, time itself. No matter how strong he became, God consumed his lifespan 10 times faster than normal. 8 years. No matter what he accomplished, that was the limit. And so, the pressure to learn, to grow, and to become unstoppable in that window of time created one of the strongest silent restrictions Nen could ever produce. How many Nen abilities can you master in 8 years? How much can you develop? This invisible wall, knowing death was inevitable, only made God more powerful. Chaos knew this. He understood and accepted it. And he was determined to use that knowledge to his advantage. So he came to a conclusion. If every god had their own unique power, then so should he. God gave him the framework. But now he needed to shape something unique, a second ability, personal and devastating. It had to be crafted under the transformation system to maximize his 200% talent advantage. The good news? The God ability didn't take up any memory space at all. It was passive, like breathing. He still had a full ability slot to work with. Transformation. He muttered the word, eyes narrowing. He needed to approach this with care. This was no ordinary development, this was his own domain. His signature. His divine weapon. And he wasn't in a rush. There's no point forcing something immature. Better to wait. Learn more. Watch more. Then build something refined. His thoughts began to slow. Besides. And with that, Chaos drifted into sleep, peaceful, but already dreaming of what came next. Chapter 58. September 16th. 1:30 a.m. Chaos was in a light sleep. One day earlier, late at night on the 15th. In an opulent, dimly lit reception room, one woman and 5 men sat in a loose semicircle. "Excuse me, Miss Remy." The speaker was a man in a crisp white suit, his smile composed and charming. His gold-rimmed glasses added to the impression of elegance. "It's not a big deal, but..." The red-haired woman, Miss Remy, rested her chin on her hand, scrutinizing the man before her with an air of suspicion. The man simply spread his hands and spoke gently, "Ms. Remy, please don't worry. We're fully aware of the rules, and more importantly, we know who's backing you." Beside him stood a tall figure, while a short, bald man sat nearby on a sofa, his feet dangling off the edge as he sipped tea from a porcelain cup. Opposite them sat a cold-eyed man in a traditional tribal robe, and next to him, a powerfully built man with metallic skin sat cross-legged. "Well, that's good to hear," Remy nodded, apparently satisfied. Trust was quickly established between the two parties, thanks to the man's reassurance. Remy, member of the Dark Guild. Role, fortune teller. No combat capability, but one of the top intelligence-gathering specialists under the personal protection of the guild's leader. Sith, the man in the white suit. Also a member of the Dark Guild. Their trust wasn't based on familiarity, it was based on fear. Remy believed that Sith wouldn't dare violate the rules imposed by the guild's higher powers. Dark guilds were similar to mercenary organizations, but with fewer scruples. They cared only for profit, and their only guiding principle was a bare minimum rule set that kept the guild functional. For example, killing your employer openly would damage the guild's reputation and cost everyone work. But betrayals between members, unpunished. Only results mattered, whoever returned with the target got the reward. "So, tell me what you want," Remy said cheerfully, already imagining the credits that would soon hit her account. "First," Sith said, pulling out his phone and turning on the screen, "I want to understand how dangerous it is for us to capture this individual alive." He handed the phone to Remy. She took it and glanced at the image displayed, a silver-haired girl in a wheelchair. Her blue eyes glimmered on screen for a brief second before fading into the background. "I see. So that's the mission you accepted." She handed the phone back with casual ease. "No wonder you came to me." Sith smiled. "Honestly, if it weren't for the chance to witness Miss Remy's lovely ability in person, we wouldn't have accepted such a clearly high-risk job. If you talk like that to a lady you've just met, I'll count it as sexual harassment," Remy said flatly, tossing the phone back into Sith's lap. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the room, cold and sharp. "Enough with the pointless flirting, Sith." It was the man in the tribal garb, eyes narrow and venomous like a rattlesnake's. "Just tell Miss Remy what we need. I don't have time to waste with your games." Now, Sith replied smoothly, completely unfazed. "Isn't it an honor to spend more time in Miss Remy's company?" Snake Bone, clearly unimpressed, fell silent, eyes sharp. Saying anything else might offend her. He understood the danger of annoying a Nen-based fortune teller. Still, he stared at Sith like he was a wild animal waiting for a chance to strike. What a pain. Before the tension escalated, Remy cut in. "Forget it. I'm done sitting here listening to you all babble." Her tone shifted from uninterested to serious. "Let's begin." Without waiting for confirmation, she sat upright and placed her hands on the table. A faint Nen aura flowed from her palms, forming around a white crystal orb positioned on a stand. "You said you want an assessment of the risk involved in capturing this girl alive, correct? All 5 of you?" She glanced toward Sith to confirm. "Yes," Sith said, backing off from further small talk. He could tell Remy wasn't interested. Bad first impression. Oh well. Not like we'll be working together again. "According to the intel I gathered," Sith added, "Miss Remy, you can continue performing divinations throughout the mission, correct?" "I understand it well," Remy replied flatly. "Good. Please don't cancel your ability after the first reading, I'll likely have more requests based on the results." Keeping his tone polite, Sith dropped any pretense of charm. "Fine." Remy, chest lifted in focus, turned back to the crystal ball. The fortune teller of the moon. An ability capable of predicting anything based on directional intent. Constraint 1, can only be used on the 15th of each month. Constraint 2. After use, the user enters a period of forced abstinence for 1 month. The more information drawn, the longer the abstinence period becomes. Moonlight like Nen began swirling around her like flowing mist. At the same time, the crystal ball beneath her palm glowed red. Sith, seeing this, grew serious. Red was an ominous sign in Nen-based divination. Knowing better than to interrupt, he said nothing and waited. The degree of danger is intense, Remy finally said in a solemn tone. How dangerous? Sith asked, now fully attentive. In the worst-case scenario, 2 of the 5 of you will die. The room fell into silence. Each man processed the words in his own way, but the effect was the same, hesitation. These weren't fools who valued money over life. A 40% death rate was far beyond what they expected. Even for a 50 billion Jenny reward. This was a serious gamble. Unconsciously, they all began re-evaluating their involvement. Sith, I'm out, Snakebone said suddenly. Cyborg and I will pay 2/5 of the cost for Miss Remy's divination and withdraw. The words were decisive, clear and firm. Are you sure? Remy asked, pausing. I only gave the worst-case scenario. I haven't revealed the best case yet. Snakebone looked at Sith, who gave a slight nod. Turning back to Remy, he said, apologies. Please continue, Miss Remy. Chapter 59. Well, listen up, this fortune-teller doesn't repeat herself. Remy sat upright, her tone cool and confident. The worst-case scenario assumes total ignorance. Now that you're informed, your odds shift. Just knowing that 2 of you could die increases your vigilance. At least 1 death can be avoided. That's the power of information. If needed, I can continue divining the individuals who pose a threat. In the best-case scenario, none of you would even get injured. The risk will drop as I provide more intel. She sat back, hands folded. Sith and Snakebone exchanged a glance. Snakebone gave a slight nod. Remy's message was clear, the worst-case scenario had technically already passed. They had the intel, which meant their risk was only going to decrease. This mission was doable. Then let's proceed, Sith said calmly. Miss Remy, please share what you can about any combatants around the target who might threaten us. Remy held up a hand. Let me be absolutely clear, I won't attempt to divine their specific Nen abilities. Not even for 50 billion. That kind of price. Not worth it. She muttered under her breath, shooting a brief glance around the room. Oh, and by the way, that last reading was worth 5 billion. 5 billion? The burly man next to Sith widened his eyes and leaned over, whispering in a voice so gravelly it echoed through the large reception room. Boss Sith. This woman's a gold-eating beast. Why not just let the 2 guys on the other team die? More money for the rest of us. Sith. Under the withering stares of both Snakebone and Remy, Sith pinched his temples and forced a smile. Sorry. He's not all there. He cleared his throat. Anyway, Miss Remy, our budget for intelligence is around 20 billion. If we're about to exceed that, please notify us so we can reassess. Remy rolled her eyes and turned away, standing with an expression of bored professionalism. No point arguing with an idiot. Sith's message was clear, just start the next divination, skip the chatter. Shh. Snowy white light spilled from the crystal ball, casting an ethereal glow into the air. Slowly, it formed a floating 3-dimensional projection. 3 figures appeared. The one on the left was large and heavy-set, with protruding teeth. The one on the right had sharp cheeks and a rugged appearance. In the center stood a boy in a sleek black suit, calm expression, with delicate features, and orange earrings. This is the one you need to worry about, Remy said, pointing directly at the center figure. This boy with the earrings. He's the most dangerous. She turned her head toward Sith. That little nugget will cost you 10 billion. Sith narrowed his eyes, staring at Chaos's image. Of all Nen users, the most dangerous were young geniuses, prodigies who hadn't yet stabilized. Their abilities evolved mid-battle. Their power could spike without warning. It was unpredictable, terrifying. 15 billion so far. Only 5 billion left in the budget. One more question. After a pause, Sith asked calmly, Miss Remy, please divine what kind of terrain would be most effective at limiting this young man's strength. Remy didn't speak. She simply waved her hand. The floating image dissolved into specks of white Nen, and the crystal ball shimmered. A thin white line formed inside it. Above the line, nothing changed. Below it, a bright white glow filled the lower half. A flat, open area. The fewer obstacles, the more restricted he'll be. Remy interpreted the result without hesitation. Then she turned back to Sith. That's 20 billion even. Want to keep going? She paused. You know the rules. It's one of my abilities restrictions. After a reading, I enter a cooldown. No more divinations for a full month. Sith turned to Snakebone. He was clearly willing to continue if Snakebone agreed, but Snakebone shook his head. 50 billion was the payout. They'd already spent 2/5 of it on intel alone. That was enough to tip the odds in their favor. Seeing Snakebone's decision, Sith nodded. He wouldn't overstep. This was a joint operation. Cooperation came first. Understood. Miss Remy, thank you very much for your assistance. His voice was formal now. Canceling the ability, Remy held out her hand to him directly. She wasn't stupid. Even if the team wasn't fully aligned, Sith was clearly the leader, and the one who would be paying. Miss Remy is truly a formidable woman. Smiling helplessly, Sith retrieved a sleek black card and placed it gently in her palm. Anonymous card. Default pin hasn't been changed. When Remy looked up sharply, he immediately understood. Oh, right. In a flash, she tucked the card into a hidden pouch sewn into her lace skirt. Why is it already 1 o'clock? Remy blinked at the ornate grandfather clock in the corner. Sorry, Mr. Sith. Ladies shouldn't stay up this late. Let's wrap this up. She yawned dramatically and waved her hand in mock dismissal. Then we'll take our leave, Miss Remy, Sith said smoothly, rising to his feet. The message was clear. They'd overstayed. Without another word, Sith walked out. The tall man followed, the short man hopped down from the couch, and the snake-like figure slithered behind with metallic limbs that clicked softly across the floor. Come again anytime. Remy called out, waving cheerfully as they disappeared down the corridor. Ah! The moment they vanished, Remy dropped back onto the sofa with a flop. Pulling the black card to her chest, she squealed and rolled back and forth like an excited child. Tap tap. Footsteps echoed down the spiral staircase. First appeared black high-heeled boots. Then a long dark cloak. Then a deep red vintage trench coat. And finally, a striking figure with silver and black slicked back hair and a confident smile descended gracefully. Little Remy, it's only 20 billion. Is that really worth celebrating? He sat casually beside her and poured himself some black tea. Remy sat up, chin tilted, defiant. I've never gotten paid for a divination before. Not even the president has that kind of record. Oh? The man raised a brow, amused. Well, this time, he said, lifting his cup, you'll get the full 50 billion reward. He smiled faintly as he watched the black tea swirl. Oh, those poor fools, Remy said softly, resting her chin in her hand as she stared at the now empty doorway. Being targeted by the president, Chapter 60. Late at night, under a jade-round moon, a long black sedan sped toward the airport. Found it, Sith. Snakebone held his phone up, eyes fixed on the mostly brown satellite image on the screen. "Where is it?" Sith asked from the back seat. "The Tasha Desert," Snakebone replied. "It's the flattest, widest place between Windmill Town and Bien Port. About 13 kilometers of barren land." He handed the phone over. Sith zoomed out and studied the map before smiling. "Perfect. We'll wait for them there. Plenty of time to arrive before noon on the 16th. Snakebone's gaze didn't shift. "Don't you think it's strange, Sith?" "What is?" "The employer issued this mission last month, yet they now somehow know the target's exact route and time of travel, classified intel," Snakebone said, staring at him. "You asked me to join this operation. I think I deserve an answer. I assumed the target was in a fixed location, which would justify the intel. But now you're handing me real-time movement data. How do they have that?" "Oh, that." Sith waved dismissively. "When I accepted the mission, the employer provided contact access. They said they'd update us with the target's location and route whenever we were ready to act. So the employer can track the target in real time." Snakebone narrowed his eyes. "That means they're in complete control. Why do they even need us?" No, Snakebone-san." Sith shook his finger. "I looked into it. The target's father is a mafia boss. Which means our employer is probably part of a rival group. Having a spy high up in the enemy ranks is pretty standard. That's likely how they're getting the data. As for why they need us, simple. They don't have the firepower. For something this sensitive, hiring professionals like us is the smart move." "You're speculating," Snakebone said bluntly, though he seemed to agree. "It's the only possibility that fits." And it was. No one dared deceive members of the Dark Guild. A false intel leak that led to operatives dying unnecessarily would violate the minimum code. That wasn't allowed, even for an organization built around chaos. Dead operatives didn't keep the guild running. Snakebone folded his arms, considering the logic. He had just reviewed the prophecy intel. Even with all 5 members launching a surprise attack, 2 were still likely to die. That meant the target had serious protection. So the enemy, the employer, wanted to use her as leverage. It added up. Am I overthinking this? Something still felt off. Frowning, Snakebone turned his attention back to the dark highway flashing past the window. "Snakebone-san," Sith interrupted gently, "forgive the distraction, but we still need to sort out our battle strategy." Snakebone didn't look back. "You mean the engagement specifics? I'm already thinking about it." He rolled down the window. Wind rushed in, whipping his long black hair around. He propped his elbow on the edge, resting his chin on his hand. "Let me make one thing clear. I'm not revealing my ability. Even if I did, there's no guarantee it would mesh with yours. So I'm handling things solo." "No objections," Sith said immediately. "In fact, I'd prefer to make a direct proposal. Let the 3 of us handle the boy. I'll even give you a heads up, our abilities are more effective against individuals." "Fine." Snakebone didn't hesitate. "Steelbone and I will handle the other 2. "Perfect." Sith smirked faintly. As their plans settled, far away, the entire scene was being projected, perfectly, onto a soft blue mirror hovering in the air within a luxurious reception room. And the people in the car had no idea. September 16th, morning, Windmill Town. The sun was high and warm. 2 black cars rolled gently out of the peaceful lakeside town. In the lead vehicle sat Gia, Gliss, Moken, and Ireland. In the second, Tulu, Chaos, and Eliza. Gia, also called Yi, was the driver Moken had arranged. Outside, rows of windmills turned slowly in the early breeze. Their blades shimmered in the sunlight, scattering reflections across the water. "What a beautiful view," Eliza said, eyes bright as she gazed out from the backseat. After a few more minutes on the road, Windmill Town disappeared behind them. Eliza withdrew her gaze slowly, a reluctant smile on her lips. She knew this would be a long absence. She had spent her life here, and likely wouldn't return for a long time. Her father was a mafia boss. It was unlikely he'd ever accompany her back. Dad. Just thinking of him filled Eliza with anticipation. Her sadness faded quickly, replaced by hope. Naturally, Chaos sat beside her. He was her protector, after all. At the moment, he had his eyes closed, seemingly resting. Then Tulu's voice came from the front seat. Chaos. Chaos opened his eyes. What is it? A strange little creature was suddenly hovering in his line of sight. It had a gray, hunched body, tiny wings, and thin, almost sketch-like limbs. In one hand, it held a trident. Just as Chaos began to assess it, Tulu turned around with a grin. Let me introduce you to my Nen beast, Nyx. Chaos studied it for a second. You manifested it already? His tone was thoughtful. Then the creature, Nyx, grinned, revealing a row of large white teeth. It pointed to its mouth and spoke. Lord Chaos, can I get a breath of your Nen? Drool leaked from the corners of its mouth as it giggled stupidly. Chaos raised an eyebrow, smiling slightly. Then he turned to Tulu. Tell me about your ability. He didn't respond to Nyx's question. After all, Chaos still didn't know what Tulu's ability actually did. If he allowed Nyx to drain any of his aura without knowing the mechanics, it could backfire, especially with danger potentially looming at any moment. Chapter 61. Around 1 p.m., two black vehicles sped into the sparse and sun-scorched expanse of the Tasha Desert. 5 hours had passed since Chaos and his team left Windmill Town. The journey had been smooth. A girl rested peacefully on his shoulder, fast asleep. Chaos, half dozing himself, gazed out the window. The desert rolled by, littered with glimmering stones and bare rock. He pulled out his phone. 2 hours left. A place like this, with a wide, unobstructed view, should be relatively safe. Or so he thought. In the front car, Gliss, seated in the passenger seat, spotted something strange, hundreds of meters ahead, a dark, slick patch on the road. Stop the car. Now. Gliss spun around, shouting at Gia. Gia, an ordinary civilian, froze. His reflexes weren't honed for high-stakes emergencies. At a speed of 100 kilometers per hour, even a moment of hesitation meant the car surged forward dozens of meters. Chaos, there's a liquid on the road, looks like oil. Gliss tapped the earpiece on his right ear, his voice sharp with urgency. Understood. Stop immediately. Chaos's calm voice came through. He didn't hesitate. The moment he heard Gliss's warning, he gave the order to his own driver, Yi. What? Yi blinked, stunned. But the convoy had maintained nearly 100 meters of separation, and the liquid was still about 200 meters ahead, just enough time to react. Screech. Chaos's car skidded to a halt roughly 50 meters before reaching the black liquid. Up ahead, Gliss's vehicle didn't stop in time. Gia was too slow. As Chaos broke through the door with Eliza in his arms, activating Ken to maintain control midair, Gliss's car veered sideways, spun, and skidded off the road entirely. Whether it was oil or not, the slick was clearly engineered to sabotage any fast-moving car. The implication was clear. This wasn't an accident. The enemy had made their move. Chaos had reached this conclusion the instant Gliss raised the alarm. Within that single second, he had already acted. Activating Ken, he enveloped both himself and Eliza while bracing his body. As the car skidded to a near stop, he swiftly adjusted posture, lifted Eliza securely in both arms, and shattered the car door. Outside, feet planted firmly, he expanded his Nen field. Hunting field. Golden particles burst out from his body, rippling across the gravel in all directions, above, around, and below, instantly scanning everything within a 1,000-meter radius. The terrain, harsh, brown, scattered with rocks. One car now sat disabled, twisted at an angle. And emerging from the periphery. 4 hostile figures. All experienced Nen users. Above and to the left, about 200 meters away, 2 opponents. A tall, metallic-skinned man running toward Gliss's position. A man in a long robe, face shadowed and grim, heading straight for Chaos. Below and to the right, another 2. One small. One large. Moving together to flank them from behind. All were using Ken with precision. No amateurs here. In a blink, Chaos assessed the situation. At their current speeds, the enemies were seconds from engagement. Tulu, Chaos ordered coolly, someone's approaching from 200 meters above. Take him. Got it. Tulu's response was instant. Aura exploded from his body as he surged toward the threat. 4 attackers. All dangerous. Even the weakest among them had stronger aura than Gliss. This wasn't random, this was a pro team. Tulu and Gliss could engage 2 of them. But in Chaos's judgment, they likely wouldn't win outright, they'd delay, at best. Tulu had explained his ability that morning. It was powerful, but clearly designed to scale with time. Not a burst-type skill. Which meant Chaos had to eliminate the remaining 2. Fast. And all while protecting Eliza, who had no combat ability at all. He held her tightly, lowering his chin, eyes locking onto the oncoming enemies. What's going on, Chaos? Eliza had just woken, shaken by the violent movement. She looked up at his face, bathed in golden light. So warm. She was momentarily dazed by the sensation of being held so securely. It's fine, Chaos said, his voice low. Just close your eyes. Hold on tight. Without another word, Eliza rested her head against his shoulder, closed her eyes, and held him close. Chaos's mind was already racing. Why use oil? Why not attack directly with Nen techniques? If their objective was to kill, they had many better options. From a distance, even basic emitter-type abilities could destroy a vehicle. Yet when the convoy passed through the ambush point, no one attacked. Even if the enemy had been spotted and their plan compromised, they still had a chance to inflict damage. But they hadn't. That meant this wasn't a kill operation. They wanted to capture. Alive. If their goal was to take Eliza, the logic tracked. A forced crash, followed by encirclement. Minimal damage, maximum control. Also, if there were only 4 attackers. It would be a strange risk. Which meant, there could be more. Immediately, Chaos recast Hunting Field, this time without limiting it. Earlier, he'd projected an inverted dome, subconsciously assuming the threat was above ground. But now, golden particles surged outward again, this time in all directions. Sky. Ground. Underground. And that's when he found them. Names surfaced in his mind, etched there by instinctual recognition. Snake Bone. Cyborg. Sith. Ivor. The 4 visible attackers. But below them, one more presence. For the second time, the enemies were struck by the sensation of being watched by a god. Golden pupils, massive, divine, emotionless, opened in their minds. Even hardened killers hesitated. Again? Sith murmured, his body stalling instinctively. Fear surged. Even Mirko, hiding more than 10 meters underground, froze. For the first time, the subterranean operative felt exposed, like he was under a spotlight. Eyes wide, fangs visible, he stared upward in panic. Chaos had found him. Chapter 62. The emergence of Mirko allowed Chaos to mentally rank Cyborg as only the second weakest opponent. Even he, a near-bottom threat, radiated a stronger aura than Gliss, a skilled Nen user from Meteor City. That alone confirmed this was a professional squad. Veterans. All familiar with high-level Nen applications like N. Sith's face darkened. Two massive waves of detection had swept across the desert. It was now unmistakable, they were dealing with someone whose aura and sensory reach were unprecedented. He knew the terrain. He knew their distances. Even if both vehicles had reacted and stopped in time, they wouldn't be far from the oil-slick trap site. And this man had detected them from hundreds of meters away. A 1,000-meter N? Unbelievable. For most Nen users, even 10 to 15 meters was enough for a decent N, enough to alert them to any threat proportional to their power. But this? This was at least 20 times more than that. True, strength isn't only defined by N range, but it's a massive indicator. A wide area N user is usually no amateur. Boss Sith, what do we do? Abort? Ivor, the towering enhancer, asked, his brow furrowed. He was direct, but not stupid. Sith hesitated. His face tensed. No. I think this might be the man's Nen ability. He finally made the call. Remy's divination wouldn't be wrong. That was a fact in their guild. Everyone knew it. Sith had been shaken at first. Who wouldn't be? But with that prophecy in mind, he forced himself to stay calm and rational. On the other end, Cyborg received the same decision through his earpiece. He and Sith, both acting as tactical leads, independently trusted Remy's results over their own instincts. They were right. The hunting field was indeed a unique ability developed by Chaos, distinct from conventional N, amplified by his extraordinary talent. The first skirmish began, Snakebone versus Tulu. The moment Chaos gave the order, Tulu had already spotted Snakebone charging toward them. The open terrain made the 200-meter gap instantly visible. In less than 2 seconds, the distance had shrunk to 30 meters, thanks to the delay caused by Chaos's second Nen sweep, which briefly halted Snakebone's advance. In reality, Tulu had already begun his attack. Nen coursed through his arms. As he sprinted, he pulled back both hands and launched 2 glowing white Nen bullets at high speed. Snakebone's cold eyes glinted as he shifted sideways, stomping with precision and dodging both shots with ease. Boom boom. The light bullets exploded on the gravel, carving out 2 shallow craters a few meters wide. As the smoke drifted, Snakebone smirked. Another Nen bullet whistled toward him. He lifted his unnaturally long sleeves, reinforced with Gyo, and sliced through the attack in one clean arc. Swish. The shot ruptured on impact, its residual force harmlessly dispersed. He spotted Tulu repositioning leftward, charging another blast. Snakebone responded with a thunderous stomp, then dashed forward with startling speed. If this was just a basic emission-type attack, there was no need for defense. Snakebone had paused earlier to evaluate whether Tulu's Nen bullets had hidden effects, like post-contact activation or conditional detonation. But now, his instincts told him these were straightforward emission blasts, maybe slightly enhanced, but lacking secondary triggers. Snakebone had made up his mind. He would crush his opponent with raw power. Tulu was a standard emission-type user. Nothing else mattered. His bullets were ineffective, and Snakebone's Nen output vastly outclassed his. As an experienced fighter, Snakebone swiftly tailored his battle plan. It was blunt, yes, but precise. Intelligence, observation, and pure dominance. Nen battles aren't always intricate chess matches. Sometimes, victory comes down to information and overwhelming force. Especially when there's a clear gap in raw power. Tulu, for his part, wasn't delusional. He immediately noted the power gap, and planned accordingly. As Snakebone charged, Tulu veered to the side and launched a heavier Nen bomb. He knew from the start that he couldn't win. Not directly. His strategy had always been delay and containment. He could gamble, use World Devourer, his trump card that activated through Zetsu, but the risk was enormous. One mistake and he'd be done. Worse, if Chaos were to fall early, Tulu would have to face two opponents. That was unacceptable. Tulu trusted Chaos completely. His victory was just a matter of time. And until then, Tulu's job was simple: stall the enemy. He didn't know Chaos would have to deal with two Nen users. As his next air bullet detonated, Snakebone broke through the gust with ease. Same attack pattern. Same dodging rhythm. Snakebone narrowed his eyes. Tulu was creating distance with every move, firing while falling back. Smart. You've assessed the difference in our strength correctly, Snakebone thought. But it won't matter. He batted aside another shot like a fly. The distance between them continued to shrink. Tulu's attacks lacked any real threat. His evasion was tight, but Snakebone's output was just higher, and so was his speed. Gravel scattered underfoot as both left trails in the dust. At the 10-second mark, Snakebone exploded forward. Boom. More Nen dispersed from his legs, launching him high into the air. Like a dark streak, he descended fast. From beneath his flowing sleeves, hands emerged, sharp, poised, and venomous. Entangler. His hybrid ability, a blend of manipulation and emission. Ability 1, Limb Extension, Chapter 63. Just as Snakebone launched himself through the air, using the force of an explosive leap to close the distance and strike at Tulu. Elsewhere, the situation escalated. Damn it. Are you guys okay? Gliss had already broken open the car door and leapt out. Maintaining his ken, he sprinted toward the overturned vehicle, its wheels facing the sky, dust curling around it, his expression tight with frustration. As he moved, Chaos's voice came through his earpiece. Gliss, can you hear me? I can hear you, Gliss replied, tapping the headset quickly. Good. An enemy is approaching your position. Eliminate them. If the old man isn't seriously hurt, send him to assist me immediately. Understood, Gliss said seriously. Having experienced Chaos's hunting field twice, Gliss wasn't surprised Chaos knew exactly what was happening. If anything, he felt comforted, like he could trust his own life had already been accounted for in Chaos's plans. He reached the flipped vehicle. Inside, blood masked the face of Gia, the civilian driver. It wasn't clear if he was alive or not. Gliss frowned, but didn't pause. Even without seeing it directly, he could sense Nen inside the car. The old butler, Moken, had some real strength. Maybe not unscathed, but likely capable of surviving this crash and protecting those with him. Brace yourself, I'm flipping the car, Gliss called. Sure enough, the result was slightly better than expected. Moken, while pale and slightly bruised, had not only shielded himself but also protected Ireland, his granddaughter. Bang! The car slammed back onto its wheels. Old man, Gliss barked, yanking open the door. You've got some fight left in you. The young lady is with Chaos. If nothing's gone wrong, he's currently tied down protecting her. You need to back him up. Now. He didn't wait for a response. Without pause, Gliss turned and ran toward the threat he could already feel looming. Chaos had given the order, but even if he hadn't, Gliss would have made the same choice. He was a pro. And abandoning the battlefield wasn't in his blood, especially when there were still people nearby who could act. This wasn't just impulse. Gliss had read the situation. The enemy came prepared. They weren't going to let anyone escape unchallenged. Behind him, in the car. Grandpa. Where's Eliza? Ireland looked shaken. It's her first time so far from home. Moken's gaze stayed locked on Gliss's retreating back. His face hardened. Ireland. Don't go near a fight. You'll only get in the way. Understand? She stared at him, stunned. He opened the door, stepped out into the sun, and closed it behind him. With a final glance, he added, "Stay here. Wait for Lord Chaos and me to bring the young lady back." And then he was gone. Even if it meant leaving his granddaughter in a car with a possibly dead man, he had no choice. This was war. And only the pros could move freely in it. He understood what Gliss meant, the difference between fighting with everything, and fighting while protecting someone else. In the distance, the roar of an engine faded. That was the car Chaos had told to leave, so it wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. But Chaos couldn't bring himself to put Eliza in it. Not with the strange presence lurking underground. A mole-like creature, hiding out of reach, probably one of the enemy's backup operatives. If their aim was to capture, and he simply killed the two opponents before him, they could still snatch Eliza from below the earth and vanish. That was too risky. And Chaos wasn't arrogant enough to believe he could fight two skilled nin users and protect her at the same time. Moken's arrival was a turning point. Chaos was certain of one thing: the underground enemy could move freely through soil. That kind of ability usually came with trade-offs, like poor combat strength. A seasoned fighter like Moken might not have much nen left, but his skill could still hold someone off, even at the cost of his life. And that would be enough. So why hadn't Chaos handed Eliza off earlier? Simple. His thoughts had been racing, and his N had been extended multiple times in quick succession. By the time he formed a viable plan, the enemy was already upon him. Turning his back on an unknown nin user was suicide. Now, maintaining his ken, Chaos stood still, expression unreadable, as the enemy stopped just 5 or 6 meters away. Sith, white suit, gold-rimmed glasses, expression cool. Ivor, tall and brawny, dressed like a martial artist, build nearly identical to Tulu. Chaos was already bracing for combat. After all, the capture alive scenario could have easily been a trick. The whole setup, a calculated way to make him drop his guard, then kill Eliza and retreat. Any skilled nin user could leap from a car and protect a civilian during high-speed travel. The scenario he'd just witnessed could have been staged. So, even now, even as Ivor seemed stunned at the sight of Eliza cradled safely in Chaos's arms, Chaos refused to assume anything. Ivor's confusion might be genuine. Or it might not. He couldn't risk a bet. Sith, on the other hand, was already analyzing things differently. He wasn't focused on Chaos's supposed recklessness in fighting while carrying a burden. He was watching the nen. That dense, fluctuating aura, highly active and layered with purpose. Was Chaos doing this because he had no choice? Or because he'd already seen through their objective? Yes, the mission's parameters weren't a secret. Their orders were to capture the girl alive. It was entirely possible that someone like Chaos, after experiencing 2 waves of hunting field, had figured it out. But the real question was, why was he still fighting? Was it sheer arrogance? Did he truly believe he could defeat them, even while burdened? Or was this girl so important that he had no choice? That he'd rather die than give her up? As they stared each other down, a flurry of thoughts filled the space between them. The battle had not yet begun. But the mind games had already started. Chapter 64. This wasn't a stalemate, because at the very moment they met, both sides had already processed their thoughts. Then Ivor spoke. "Boss Sith, what should we do?" Exactly as Sith expected. Based on what he knew about Ivor, he had a tendency to speak without a filter, blurting out things only he should know, never considering whether those words might give their enemy an informational edge. Still, even if Chaos did pick up on it, Sith knew it wouldn't be Ivor's intention. Ivor wouldn't even realize what he'd given away. The fact that their first move was to ask a question rather than attack made it even more obvious. They were trying not to kill the target. A critical mistake. Sith calculated quickly. If Chaos had been 60% certain before that their objective was to capture Eliza alive, this careless remark from Ivor had raised that certainty to 80 or 90%. Even so, Chaos was not backing down. Not even hesitating. That meant the girl's importance to him was absolute, enough that he wouldn't risk even a gamble, even if his own life wasn't necessarily threatened. That kind of resolve could be used. Sith's glasses caught the desert sun with a sharp glint. "Don't worry. Kill him." His voice was calm. "Even if the target dies, the reward will just be reduced, not cancelled. Still worth it." As soon as the words left his mouth, Ivor exploded forward. To Ivor, that second half didn't matter. He knew Sith was lying, but he didn't care. Orders were orders. Sith said attack, so he did. That trust between them was absolute. Sith knew this too. So he hadn't been speaking to Ivor. That last sentence had been for Chaos. It worked. Chaos's expression sharpened instantly. Looking at Ivor charging like a boulder down a slope, a flash of murderous intent surged in his eyes. Ivor was clearly a reinforcement type. Chaos, ordinarily, could take him out with a well-timed burst of transformative power. If Eliza weren't in his arms, he'd have a 60% chance of killing him outright before the battle even began. But that was only against one opponent. Sith still stood off to the side, calm and watchful. Chaos couldn't spare focus to analyze him completely. And holding Eliza made that gamble impossible. Boom. Amid shattered rock and dust, Chaos leapt back just as Ivor's punch struck the ground with thunderous force. Golden Nen flared, debris flew, and a deep crater, more than a meter wide, appeared where Chaos had stood. Definitely a reinforcement type, Chaos thought, a cold bead of sweat running down his temple. If he tried to block that with raw strength, he'd be wrecked. Then, he felt it. A surge of white aura, coming from Sith. Sith raised one hand upward, the other anchored at his waist, a gleaming orb of focused Nen forming between his palms. A Nen bullet? Chaos narrowed his eyes. Sith's posture, the timing, the flow of Nen, all pointed toward the emission, release, category. But something was off. The danger warning pulsing in Chaos's gut didn't match the profile of a typical long-range emitter. It wasn't a contradiction. It was instinct. He's not an emitter. Chaos realized, eyes sharp. Or at least not entirely. No time to confirm. Ivor was already chasing him, throwing another crushing punch. Chaos could only dodge, suppressing his fury. Boom. 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 8 attacks in 3 seconds. Chaos avoided each, spinning, flipping, and sliding as Ivor pursued him across the cracked stone. He couldn't fully disengage, but he managed to keep roughly 50 meters between himself and Sith. That was the limit of what he could do while carrying Eliza. And it was all Sith needed. The glowing white orb of Nen between Sith's hands hummed ominously. It looked similar to one of Tulu's basic aura bullets, but Chaos wasn't fooled. A master like Sith wouldn't require 3 full seconds to charge a regular blast. Sith's faint smirk confirmed it. He cast a glance toward the close-range struggle between Chaos and Ivor, then murmured to himself. They figured I wasn't an emitter and distanced themselves. Smart move, usually. But against my ability, that distance won't help. What a shame. His hand slid back, then he hurled the glowing orb forward like a fastball. High Roller Gambler. Restriction 1, requires a 3-second charge time to condense the Nen sphere. Restriction 2, must maintain a pseudo-Zetsu state while charging. Based on those conditions alone, Chaos knew this wasn't a move to take lightly. The orb twisted violently through the air, tearing toward him. Sith had chosen his moment perfectly, right after Chaos dodged Ivor and was caught in midair, exposed. He couldn't escape. This is bad. His senses screamed at him. The danger wasn't just high, it was abnormal. Something deeper. No time. Chaos abandoned any thoughts of restraint. A surge of cold aura exploded from his feet, up his legs. His left leg swung across the air like a blade. And a sharp, orange glowing crescent flashed out, tearing straight through the air. Crack. The orange slash met the incoming Nen bullet. And split it in two. Landing hard, Chaos looked up in shock. That slash had been a combo, his god-enhanced divine edge, shadowless, merged with full force emission strength. And yet, he'd expected the bullet to either match his slash, or at least detonate. Instead, it snapped apart like paper. That wasn't just raw power. His eyes flicked back to Sith, just in time to see a small, silver die being tossed upward from Sith's fingers. The dots on the die flashed once. Chaos's breath caught. I've already been hit by his ability. Chapter 65. A high-stakes gambler with a materialization-type ability. By materializing a die, he can deprive an opponent of their Nen and reflect that Nen back onto himself. The number rolled determines the effect. 1 to 5, absorbs 10% per dot, up to 50% of the target's potential and manifested Nen. 6, instantly forces the opponent into a Zetsu, absolute, state for 24 hours, essentially shutting off their Nen entirely. Ability constraints. Requires 3 seconds to condense a Nen sphere as the base for activation. Must be in a Zetsu-like state while maintaining the sphere. If the Nen sphere does not make contact with the target's Nen and instead hits their body directly, it fails, and the user enters a dead state, unable to use Nen, for 24 hours. Sith was typically cautious, but at the right moment, he could be bold to the point of madness. The fact that he dared take on the mission to capture Eliza alive proved that. Originally, with just him, Ivor, and Mirko, their team could have made steady money safely. But Sith chose to partner with Snake Bone and go after a job none of them were confident in completing. It wasn't just the allure of the 50 billion bounty. Sith liked high-risk, high-reward challenges. He wouldn't have joined an organization like the Dark Guild otherwise. After all, Nen users, especially ones like him, have plenty of other ways to make money. The die flew into the air, traced a small arc, then bounced across the gravel. It landed, face up, on 5 blue dots. Sith. Your luck really sucks. The words were mock complaining, but the grin on Sith's face said otherwise. At that moment, a torrent of Nen exploded from his body like a dam breaking. Big Gambler, ability activated. Chaos immediately felt it, his own aura weakened, like someone had turned a valve inside him. His face darkened instantly. Eliza. Let go. His tone was cold. His black eyes burned with killing intent. Chaos knew all too well, now that half his Nen was gone, he wouldn't last long trying to dodge attacks while carrying Eliza. If Ivor hit them, even once, they'd both be pulp. It wasn't even a question of loyalty anymore. Survival demanded a choice. In this moment, Chaos had no illusions, Eliza was not worth his life. Unbeknownst to him, this was exactly what Sith had predicted. By carefully provoking Chaos, ordering Ivor to press the attack, making Chaos hesitate, he'd ensured Chaos would react offensively, protecting Eliza with his Nen and triggering the effect of Big Gambler. Now, with Chaos weakened, the advantage was firmly theirs. But Chaos, having seen through the trick, now made his own ruthless move. MN. Eliza nodded, obediently loosening her grip. Just as Chaos was about to lower her. Mr. Chaos. A shout rang out. It was Moken, approaching fast. The car had only been thrown about 200 meters. At full sprint, Moken could easily reach them in 10 seconds. "Eliza, don't panic. You'll be fine." Chaos turned slightly, his voice low and calm. Then he hurled Eliza backward toward Moken. He didn't pause to check whether Moken could catch her. He didn't have to. With his mastery over aura threads, now empowered by the god ability, Chaos had fully wrapped Eliza in a protective Nen shroud. Even if she hit the rocks, she'd be unharmed. The whole action took just a second. And yet Ivor, who had more than enough time to strike, didn't. Because Sith stopped him. He had anticipated this exact moment. Originally, his plan was to weaken Chaos and then grind him down alongside Ivor, all while keeping Eliza nearby. But when Chaos threw her, everything changed. Catch the target. That was the only message Ivor needed. Time resumed. The golden blade Chaos had released earlier, used to cleave through the Nen bullet, was still tearing forward at high speed. Ivor's instincts kicked in. Boom. With an explosive burst of Nen, the ground beneath Ivor cracked like a spiderweb. He shot upward, intending to leap over Chaos and catch Eliza midair. But swish, swish, swish. Dozens of golden aura threads surged up from below, shimmering like a rising tide. Ivor spotted them and reacted fast. Nen surged into his fist. He slammed it downward, parting the aura threads with sheer power. The threads trembled, but did not break. And then, they surged tighter. Tch. Despite his speed, his legs were now wrapped tight. Chaos had snared him. From 10 meters away, Chaos gritted his teeth, fingers moving in delicate control. Each was tethered to one of the golden lines, pouring out Nen in bursts. Even with preparation, even with skill, he was being dragged backward. His shoes carved trenches in the stone. With half his aura stolen, the gap between them was glaring. Ivor wasn't even focused on him. Before, that kind of mistake would have been fatal. Chaos would have taken full advantage. But now, there were no ifs. If he hadn't been weakened, if Ivor hadn't ignored him, he would have killed him. But now, all he could do was hold on, and try to bring him down. Chaos braced himself, dug in deep, then yanked his arms forward. Thud. With a thunderous crash, Ivor's huge frame slammed into the earth, raising a cloud of dust. The ground shook beneath them. Chapter 66. There was no thought of continuing the pull. Chaos knew that even if he used all his strength to restrain the enemy in front of him before his energy ran out, all it would do was delay the inevitable, a slow death. Ivor's Nen, at this moment, was nearly twice his own. Even with Ivor forced into a passive state, which meant spending more Nen to reinforce his body during attacks, Chaos couldn't close the gap. He couldn't stretch his remaining energy to compensate for double the opponent's power. And worse yet, he wasn't facing just one enemy. The golden Nen threads retracted instantly, vanishing into the air, and at the same time, Chaos activated his shadowless divine blade technique. After gaining the god ability, his talent had advanced significantly. He had fully mastered not only the sharp offensive transformation-based form, but also the solid defensive version used by Gepet to protect himself. Golden, crystalline energy enveloped Chaos's body, glowing from within like flowing molten light beneath a glass surface. But how to break the deadlock? Chaos's eyes flickered as he watched Ivor rise from the dust. Maintaining divine blade, shadowless form consumed far more Nen than Ken. If we convert it numerically, Ken consumes 1 unit of Nen for 1 unit of power. Shadowless divine blade consumes 1.6 units of Nen for 1.4 units of power. It enhanced both offense and defense, yes, but only in equal matchups. Right now, the overwhelming disparity in aura between him and Ivor neutralized its benefits, and amplified its weaknesses. With no other nen consumption, he could normally maintain Ken for about an hour. That meant, here, with current strain, it was down to 45 minutes. But in real combat, using advanced techniques like flow and gyo, that number plummeted. He'd burn out in less than 10 minutes. A war of attrition was suicide. He had to end this, fast. Could he use Ko for a single decisive strike? Maybe. But gathering 100% of his nen now, after the energy drain, would take at least 1.5 seconds. Plenty of time for Ivor to kill him 10 times over. Unless... that guy. Chaos glanced toward Sith, standing nearby. A plan clicked. From the sleeve of his right hand, a small throwing knife slid into his palm. His left hand dipped into his shirt. Both blades gripped. Golden nen wrapped around each weapon like liquid sunlight. Chaos's stance shifted, ready to strike. Swish. A gleaming golden crescent tore through the air. Sith turned lazily to look, clearly unconcerned now that he believed the fight was already won. A jagged rock pillar, no more than a few meters high, was cleanly bisected. The smoothness of the cut was like a knife through tofu. Watching, a flicker of surprise flashed in Sith's eyes. Miss Remy's divination was really something. If he hadn't gotten that prediction in advance, he might have underestimated Chaos just based on his face and build. If Chaos had struck decisively from the start, if Ivor hadn't been cautious, he might have been killed on the first exchange. But now... Sith's grin returned as he turned back to the fight. Chaos's slender form was being flung backward by a punch from the towering Ivor. We've won. Yes, Chaos's transformation ability was powerful, but with no apparent weaknesses, it relied heavily on nen output. And that had already been cut in half. Sith glanced toward a crushed vehicle half buried in rock just 20 meters away. He tapped his earpiece. Mirko. Don't move. Just watch the target. Roger that, Boss Sith. Squeaked a shrill, mouse-like voice in reply. Sith didn't respond. He stretched lazily, smiling wide, and began strolling slowly toward Chaos. There was no rush. There was no one else around. The target couldn't run. He already knew Eliza's location. She was powerless, easily retrieved at any moment. Chaos, on the other hand, was still a threat. Sith intended to eliminate him completely. One figure in white. One in gold. Both moving across the rocky field. Then, boom, the ground exploded beneath Chaos. Ivor launched forward from the rupture, carried by explosive momentum. He twisted midair, a spinning side kick aiming straight for Chaos's exposed back. But Chaos didn't use flow to block. It was as if he expected the move. He pivoted smoothly on one foot and bent backward at the waist, letting the kick sail harmlessly overhead. Missed. Again. Ivor's brow furrowed. It had been several seconds since he'd been pulled from the sky by Chaos's aura threads. Aside from one opening attack, a knife swipe that was deflected, Chaos had done nothing but dodge. Even after Ivor had deliberately exposed himself, hoping to bait an attack. Still nothing. Fine. Let's drag this out. With Chaos's aura halved, a long fight favored Ivor completely. As he landed, Ivor didn't waste time thinking. Boom. He surged forward again. Chaos had just straightened up when he saw Ivor charging straight at him. A glowing fist crashed down. Chaos crossed his arms, both blades raised, and blocked the hit dead on. Crack. It sounded like shattering glass. The crystal-like nen armor on Chaos's body fractured, spiderweb cracks appearing across its surface. The impact rattled him to the bone. But he didn't resist. He leaned into the force, using it to push himself backward and barely avoid the sweeping kick that followed. Punch, hit. Kick, missed. Ivor didn't stop. He stomped hard and pressed the attack. His technique was blunt and direct, simple punches, basic kicks, all infused with monstrous reinforcement nen. Against most opponents, that was more than enough. But Chaos. Chaos was evading everything, perfectly. Anticipate. Redirect. Dodge. Each movement was precisely timed, precisely spaced. In these brief seconds, Ivor realized something. If his opponent had been anyone else, even another transmuter with just half his aura capacity, they would already be bleeding on the ground. But this guy hadn't even been scratched. 14 seconds. Chaos's eyes never left Ivor as he calculated. Hidden within his left sleeve, nen gathered. Quiet. Patient. Ready. Chapter 67. All of his manifested nen, gathered before being weakened, was condensed and channeled into the sharp edge of his invisible blade. As long as the enemy showed the slightest opening, Chaos was confident, one clean strike would be fatal. But before that happened, he'd be killed at least once. Fighting against a powerful nen user while weakened was a guaranteed losing game. Chaos knew this. But the only way to break the deadlock was to condense his nen, and strike at the perfect moment. He'd drawn inspiration for this from Sith's ability activation process. To gather nen for a technique, you didn't have to condense it all at once. You could compress it slowly, over time. Sith had shown him that clearly. Currently, about 45% of Chaos's full energy was wrapped around his body, just enough to sustain Shadowless Divine Blade. So where was the remaining 5% of his usable nen? The answer, a flying knife, hidden in his left sleeve. Hidden within, shielded by N, reinforced through flow, and fueled by 100% of the amplification granted by his god ability, this knife, silently gathering nen, was Chaos's only trump card. The premise, survive 20 seconds. Dodging alone wouldn't cut it. Under normal conditions, or even in most fights, Chaos could find ways to stall. Talk. Distract. Play games with his opponent's mind. But not this time. Right now, this strategy was the only one left. Because he no longer had the nen to think about alternatives. He had to predict and analyze Ivor's attacks. Maintain the shadowless state. Coordinate flow to reinforce the right areas in time. Track Ivor's movement. Sustain the hidden attack charge in his left sleeve. When Ivor rushed him again, Chaos didn't hesitate. He raised both arms, and two golden throwing knives whistled through the air. He had anticipated that Ivor, cautious of potential traps, would slow down and carefully knock the knives aside before continuing his charge. But Ivor didn't do that. He did stop, but instead of deflecting the knives, he crossed his arms, channeling nen into his forearms, and let them hit. The moment Chaos dodged to the side and sent the threads of nen to retrieve the knives, Ivor struck. He reached out and grabbed Chaos's nen thread. What? Chaos, who had most of his mental energy focused on maintaining his defenses and abilities, hadn't expected such a direct and reckless move. The taut thread connected them for a split second, just enough to halt Chaos's momentum. Ivor's face lit up with excitement. He yanked the thread hard, but it slipped through his grip. Chaos had already released it. Though Ivor stumbled slightly, he still grinned. With one smooth motion, he caught the flying knives. Seeing this, Chaos drew more throwing knives from each hip, expression darkening. If Ivor now had weapons, the danger he posed would rise sharply. With a blade in hand, nen would concentrate into a single point. Without the benefit of leveraging large, sweeping attacks, his strength would focus, and pierce. Chaos was already surviving by the thinnest of margins, relying on split-second flow adjustments and anticipation. One slip, and it would all be over. "You're finished, little brat." Ivor sneered, giddy. He gripped the knives in a backhanded hold, mimicking Chaos's stance. His massive hands made the small weapons look ridiculous, almost comical. Swish. He didn't wait for a reply. Ivor hurled one blade infused with white nen. One weapon was all he needed to maintain full coverage. Simple, but it took concentration. He stepped forward, closing the gap, charging Chaos. As he advanced, Ivor raised the knife in his other hand high in a backhanded arc, exposing his abdomen completely. "You really thought I'd just keep dodging?" A cold glint flashed in Chaos's eyes. His feet had already been primed, nen charged. Boom! He launched a devastating kick, packed with over 70% of his remaining manifested nen. Ivor's tall frame shuddered, then was blown backward with a thunderous crack. Pain twisted across Ivor's face. He hadn't expected it. His assumptions had told him Chaos wouldn't risk direct attack. But Chaos had gambled, and landed the hit. Rustle. Ivor's shoes scraped violently across the ground as he skidded back, fury blazing in his eyes. Step. Chaos turned and ran. 11 seconds left. Damn it. As he sprinted, Chaos suddenly narrowed his eyes, and veered sharply to the side. Sith. Sith, who had been walking calmly and silently, waiting for the perfect moment, finally acted. He no longer suppressed his presence. As he exhaled sharply, he channeled the force into his step, instantly entering a combat state. His aura surged around him. He activated Ken. Sith was not weak in direct combat. His abilities required close range, and after activation, his nen efficiency spiked dramatically. Though he lacked Ivor's explosive force, Sith employed refined techniques from the emission category to amplify short bursts of mobility. He didn't need to sustain speed. He needed one strike. Practice, precision, and timing, that was his style. He was already within 10 meters when Chaos, distracted by Ivor, finally sensed the danger. During the earlier exchanges, Chaos had assumed Sith had gone to retrieve Eliza. He had detected no hostile intent or threatening nen presence, so he hadn't noticed Sith at all. But after Ivor was repelled, Sith struck. Cautious, but ruthless. That was Sith's method, and this was no exception. He found his opening. He committed. He poured everything into his fist. Time seemed to slow. His eyes glittered with madness. His teeth were bared in a hungry grin. The air around him thinned, all of his nen concentrated into one deadly blow. An aura of pure killing intent surged toward Chaos. He couldn't dodge. He couldn't block. He would die. That much was certain. Unless... Chaos didn't hesitate. Instinct took over. He raised his left arm, the one that had been charging for nearly a minute. There was no fear in his eyes. Only calm. Rip. His sleeve tore apart. And a piercing golden light burst from his wrist like a lightning strike. Chapter 68. At a distance of just several meters, Chaos's sleeve burst open, and a blinding golden light shot out like lightning in a storm. The sudden flare made Sith's pupils constrict sharply. In that instant, Chaos acted on instinct. He had anticipated that desperation might drive someone to resist, even at the cost of their life. He'd seen it before, people backed into corners always fought back with everything they had. But in this case, he was sure Chaos's resistance would be futile. Their gap in strength was absolute. At best, Chaos would graze him. Sith would still kill him without trouble. So he thought. But then, his thoughts stopped. Before he could process what had just happened, the golden light pierced straight through Sith's forehead. In that moment, no, the very instant Sith lost consciousness, his nen collapsed. And with that, Chaos was freed from certain death. His aura returned. Like a volcano erupting after ages of silence, Chaos's golden nen exploded outward, surging like a tidal wave, disrupting the air around him. Sith's corpse, carried forward by the momentum of his own lunge, was blasted back just before his fist could land. Shattered glasses, a body flung through the air, and blood spurting from a gaping hole in his forehead, that was the sight Ivor saw when he looked over after recovering from Chaos's earlier kick. He froze for a moment. Then the truth hit him. Boss Sith. Wide-eyed and furious, Ivor screamed. Tactics and techniques meant nothing if the result was failure. Sith had played it like he always did, careful approach, silent kill, overwhelming force. He hadn't done anything wrong. The plan was perfect. The only mistake. He had underestimated Chaos. He never imagined that a transmutation-type Nen user could wield a release-type ability with such lethal efficiency. And even when Chaos was cornered, he devised a counterattack, and executed it flawlessly. The tides had turned in a heartbeat. Sith's death wasn't just a loss, it shattered the enemy's advantage. Chaos stood silently as Sith's body hit the ground with a final, dull thud. He didn't look back. He didn't even acknowledge Ivor's rage. His Nen fully restored, golden aura raging, Chaos slid the knife back into his sleeve and raised his hand slowly. Hey! A low, nearly inaudible chuckle escaped his lips. Then he turned to face Ivor, who was trembling with fury, and said coldly, "Thanks for the warm-up." His chin tilted slightly, eyes black and sharp, filled with killing intent. Boom! The ground cracked beneath Ivor's foot as he charged, unleashing all his rage in a single movement. Even though he could feel the mountain-like pressure radiating from Chaos's aura, he didn't hold back. He came crashing down like a war hammer, right fist wrapped in surging white Nen, trailing shockwaves through the air. You think. But before he could finish, Chaos's expression darkened. Calmly, he raised his left palm to meet the strike. Now that his Nen was back, he had no reason to hold back. He didn't bother using Ken, he went straight to Ren, allowing his energy to explode freely. Flames of golden Nen flowed into his palm. Boom! A golden-white shockwave erupted between them as fist met palm. The ground trembled. But neither of them moved. Crack! A terrible sound echoed. Ivor's finger bones shattered. His entire hand trembled in Chaos's grip. Without hesitation, Chaos spoke coldly. "Against me, at full power, who do you think you are?" Ivor grit his teeth, but the pain was real. He was a seasoned enhancement-type Nen user. Pain was part of the job. His fingers were directly connected to his heart, but even so, he could endure it. Crack! Ivor swept his left elbow toward Chaos in a desperate counter, but Chaos didn't flinch. Anticipating it, he drew his hand back and sliced downward, striking Ivor's wrist cleanly. Swish! Scarlet blood sprayed through the air. Ivor's hand flew off. His face twisted, pain searing up his arm. His body recoiled instinctively, mouth open. F. But he didn't get to finish. Crack! Chaos uppercut him directly under the jaw, snapping his head back with such force that he bit down, breaking his own teeth. Ivor's vision swam. The inside of his head rang like a bell. Before he could recover. Wham! A knee to the gut. Chaos's foot dug into Ivor's abdomen with brutal precision. His eyes glinted with icy rage. Boom! Golden aura exploded at the point of impact, sending Ivor flying like a broken puppet. His body curled midair, spine bent like a shrimp, blood and teeth spewing from his mouth. But it wasn't over yet. Chaos stood motionless for a beat, then his lips curled into a sneer. This man had chased him like a wounded dog. Now it was his turn. As debris and dust filled the air, Chaos vanished in a flash of gold. TCH. Eyes bloodshot, Ivor twisted midair, slamming his feet to the ground to halt his momentum. He barely managed to stop himself before tumbling, but chaos was already closing in. Ivor roared. Roar! Like a tiger announcing its domain, he bellowed. The air rippled with the force of his nen. This was his true power. King of beasts. A nen ability modeled after the fiercest of predators. It combined roar of emission, burst of enhancement, density of transmutation. By eliminating the need to constantly modulate his aura, Ivor could channel all of his focus into raw offense and defense. It gave him immense physical boosts, but came at a price. Constraint 1, must attack in beast form. Constraint 2, must live as a beast for 3 days afterward. This was why he hadn't used it earlier, even when he held the advantage. But now, all bets were off. Chapter 69. Chant. The knife hand poised at Chaos's chest began to glow with a crystalline brilliance. He swung it outward with explosive momentum. A golden arc of nen sliced through the air, cleaving the soundwave barrier apart as the resulting shockwave blasted outward in all directions. Ivor, crouched on all fours, moved with fluid precision. His body bent low, then launched explosively. He evaded the slash with ease. There was no dramatic explosion, just a clean, quiet impact as the slash buried itself in the rocky terrain, leaving no mark behind. Neither fighter spared the aftermath a glance. Claw-shaped white nen now extended from Ivor's forearms, radiating power. Just by its form and density, it was clear, this was comparable in durability to Chaos's divine shadowless blade. As soon as Ivor landed, he moved to strike, the simplest, most effective follow-up he could think of in that moment. But things don't always follow plan. The moment his feet hit the ground, his body froze. What the hell? I'm bound? In that instant, he saw it, a golden thread of nen, trailing from his limbs. He traced it back, to Chaos's left hand. Hidden. The in technique masks nen, and can only be perceived through Gyo. Caught up in the intensity of combat, Ivor hadn't been using it, especially not after enduring 4 consecutive heavy blows. Chaos, though angry, had been acting on instinct. And that instinct led him to manipulate his thread of nen with precision, setting this trap with perfect timing. If Chaos had tried to pull earlier, Ivor might have snapped the thread. But now was the perfect distance. With no hesitation, Chaos yanked. Ivor's body lurched toward him, completely out of control. His left fist shimmered with golden light, rage and force compressed into a single devastating blow. Under Ivor's horrified stare, Chaos's fist collided with his head. Crack! Like a watermelon smashed under a hammer, Ivor's skull burst apart, scattering red and white gore in all directions. Withdrawing some nen and unleashing it again. Sharpening the aura. Chaos whispered to himself, invoking both concepts as he coiled his nen threads, binding and slicing through Ivor's body like wire. The remains were reduced to chunks. The shockwave of ren surged outward like a hurricane, scattering the fragments of Ivor's corpse over a wide radius. From the very start, Chaos had had the opening. His blade was sharp enough to sever a hand, it could have easily ended Ivor's life in a single clean strike. But between holding his nen thread, keeping energy channeled into the knife, and staying alert for any counter from Ivor, he hadn't taken that shot. Now, with nothing else in the way, the attack landed with fatal precision. Turning slowly, Chaos exhaled, smiling calmly. Then, his smile faltered. I'm being watched. It was faint, but undeniable. That eerie pressure, it wasn't just instinct. It was a distant surveillance. He didn't know who. But someone was there. He closed his eyes, raised his arms like he was basking in the afterglow of victory, a slight blush coloring his face. What a beautiful sport, he whispered with false delight. But in his mind, he was racing through theories. This feeling. Someone's watching from more than a kilometer away. When I activated hunting field earlier, no one noticed. An ally? An enemy? Their aura is faint. Probably not a direct combat type. But the worst-case scenario is that they belong to a different faction entirely. No matter who it was, Chaos made a quick decision. Recover energy using Zetsu. Maximize Nen reserves. Be ready for another fight. He frowned. I really shouldn't have shouted Ren just now. Opening his eyes, he tapped his headset and called out, "Old man." 2 kilometers away, nestled in the shadow of a rock spire, an elderly gentleman in ornate attire rested his chin on one hand, smiling faintly as he studied several floating blue monitors. Special ability, Peeping Mirror. While active, the user enters a state of detached observation, able to spy on the surroundings of any person they've seen recently. This was the same ability displayed back in Remy's mansion. And its owner? The president of the Dark Guild, Roll. A Nen ability that solidifies aura into crystal. Not too different from others, but elegantly executed. Worth the visit. He shifted his gaze across the other mirrors. On the left, a thin figure holding onto a larger man's arm, but limp, not resisting. On the right, a crater littered with twisted scraps of metal. Below, a short figure in darkness, staring upward with hesitation in his eyes. After briefly scanning all 4, Roll waved his hand, and the mirrors vanished. Well. Now that the sides have settled things, it's time for the main character to make his appearance. He stepped out from behind the rock. Then, with a light leap, he sprang into the air. As his cloak billowed, a pair of emerald green wings unfurled from his back. They beat once, wide, elegant, majestic, and he soared upward, spinning through the air before flying toward Chaos at high speed. Wings of the Wind. A hybrid ability of control and emission. The user manipulates aura flow not just to fly, but to attack and defend simultaneously. It was a superior evolution of flow, demanding constant, active Nen control. Meanwhile, some distance away, the battle between Tulu and Snakebone had not yet concluded. Snakebone pounced like a snake from the shadows, leaping high and twisting his limbs midair. His entangler technique lashed out at a sharp angle. Tulu's eyes narrowed. Still new to real combat, Tulu reacted slowly. No time for Gyo or even flow, he could only cross his arms in front of him. Thud. The impact landed. Nen smashed against Nen. Tulu stumbled back a step. Shock and numbness shot through his arms. Before he could process it, the second strike came crashing in. Chapter 70 I an author's note, Chapter 71. Bang. 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 The dull thud of flesh colliding with flesh rang out without pause. From above, Snakebone, arms whipping like machine guns, unleashed a barrage of angled punches at Tulu. Tulu, his nerves overloaded by shock and numbness, couldn't move. It was as if he were paralyzed, trapped under a spell. Extending and retracting his arms with unnatural speed, Snakebone's strikes came fast and relentless. Even without the use of Ken or full-on offensive aura, his sheer physical dominance overwhelmed Tulu's passive defense. Dozens of punches per second. Tulu stumbled back, staggered under the storm. Snakebone? He simply kept coming. Thud. Snakebone landed lightly, and in that moment, evaluated Tulu's condition. He saw that his opponent could no longer dodge. His mechanical flurry stopped, briefly. Drawing his arms back several meters, Snakebone gathered aura through precise flow control. The air began to howl. Then, boom. His fists launched forward like missiles, aimed straight at Tulu's unguarded abdomen. If an opening appeared, Snakebone would strike without hesitation. That was his nature, quick, ruthless, and efficient. This attack, reinforced with Hatsu-enhanced hardening, could cause serious internal damage. Possibly even kill. The suffocating pressure of impending death closed in. Tulu's wide, stunned eyes darted erratically. He couldn't think. His body acted instinctively. He dropped his stance, legs bent, bracing for impact. His nen surged to his arms. Snakebone noticed the reaction. For seasoned fighters like him, this kind of desperation-triggered power burst wasn't rare. That's all it is. Unfazed, he pressed the attack. A cold gleam flashed in his eyes. Boom. His fists crashed into Tulu's crossed arms. Time slowed. Where their limbs met, the air warped and rippled. Tulu's body was blown away. Snakebone retracted his arms, took one calm step forward, and gave chase. Tulu tumbled through the air for tens of meters before crashing down, his body skidding and bouncing violently along the rocky ground. His ears rang. His mind blanked. In that moment of life or death crisis, Tulu had instinctively gathered a massive surge of aura into his arms. Surprisingly, he didn't feel intense pain. Just a lingering numbness. I'm entangled? That realization struck him as he tried to move and couldn't. Blood ran from his forehead. His blurred vision turned red. Looking up, he saw Snakebone standing above him, gaze as cold as death itself. Tulu didn't hesitate. He clenched his teeth, and his aura exploded outward. Ren. His goal wasn't to win, it was to shake off whatever was binding him. This was the strategy he had set from the beginning. If he lost control of the battle, the fight was already over. Even though the odds were hopeless, Tulu refused to die without resistance. That's just how people from Meteor City were. But even the Ren burst failed. What? Tulu's thoughts stalled, right as a cold voice cut in. It's useless. Just let the Entangler drain you to death. Snakebone's Hatsu, Entangler. Ability 1, Extend limbs at will. Ability 2, absorbs the aura of the opponent from a matching body part, hand to hand, foot to foot. This was why Snakebone hadn't killed Tulu immediately. His ability grew stronger the longer he restrained his opponent. Like a serpent crushing its prey, he consumed them, slowly and steadily. Now Tulu understood. His arms were bound. That was the source of his numbness. He panicked. The Ren burst had done nothing. He was being drained rapidly. But then, an idea sparked. His own Hatsu was similar. Like Snakebone, Tulu had a Nen ability centered around absorption. Hatsu, Eater of Worlds. Devour, absorb ambient Nen from the environment, like training energy. Absorb, take the life force of living beings. Constraint 1, must be in Zetsu, absolute suppression of aura, to absorb from another living being. Constraint 2, absorbed aura can't be used directly, it must be stored in his Nen beast, Nikos. Nikos, the Nen beast. Ability 1, has its own consciousness. Only gives aura to those it acknowledges. You must ask nicely. Ability 2, can train with the user, effectively granting double the passive growth in aura. Constraint, only half of the absorbed aura is retained. Constraint 1, permanently locks half of all acquired Nen as a fee. Constraint 2, Nikos cannot be dispelled or dismissed. The clash of two absorption-type abilities was bound to come down to who could drain faster. In this case, Zetsu tipped the balance. Tulu had activated Absorb while in Zetsu, completely suppressing his aura, and the rate at which he drained Snakebone's aura far surpassed what Snakebone could take from him. Once both of their external Nen reserves dropped near zero, it came down to raw physical strength. Tulu smiled grimly. He stood up, grabbed Snakebone by the arm, and kicked him, hard, in the stomach. Elsewhere, Gliss and Cyborg's battle raged on. Gliss's Hatsu, Explosive Fist. Each punch detonated on contact, inflicting devastating impact damage, a fusion of emission and enhancement. Cyborg's Hatsu, titanium core. His body transformed into a mechanical frame powered by Nen, defense nearly impenetrable. It was a hard counter. Gliss's normal aura attacks were nearly useless. But then Gliss remembered something Chaos had once said to Tulu. Telekinetic type abilities aren't the only way to control Nen. Inspired, Gliss poured everything he had into one final punch. A white-hot Nen bomb, crafted from every last drop of aura he had. It struck Cyborg's titanium core and shattered it. Chapter 72. With life and death as bargaining chips, 3 battles had ended in just a few minutes, testament to how deadly clashes between Nen users can be. Among the 3, Chaos was the last to finish. Old man. Chaos adjusted his headset and called out. He heard only faint static in return. As long as Moken isn't stupid, he'll have already left. That's the smart move. If we lose, they survive. If we win, they can come back. Drive the car back. Knowing they had driven off earlier, Chaos gave the calm order. The moment he spoke, the oppressive feeling, the sense of being watched, that had clung to him like a shadow vanished. His accomplice watching me. Retreated? Just as Chaos was mulling over that, Moken's surprised voice came through the headset. Understood, Mr. Chaos. He didn't even ask if we won. The fact that there was time for conversation meant only one thing: the battle was over. The car screeched, steering wheel turned to the max, reversing direction toward the battlefield. Seriously? Boss Sith was defeated? Mirko, still hiding underground, couldn't believe what he was seeing. His face twisted with disbelief, but deep down, he'd already accepted it. The retreating car had turned around and was heading back. That was all the confirmation Mirko needed. His hand hovered over his communicator. He hesitated, then slowly followed after them, still underground. A sound in battle is fatal. Even with strong suspicions, Mirko told himself, maybe Snakebone and Steelbone were just beaten, and these guys are rushing back to support Sith. Once you start avoiding the truth, it's easy to spin up excuses. Still, his reasoning wasn't absurd. So he followed. Mirko's confidence came from one thing: he could always escape. No matter what happened above ground, they couldn't touch him down here. He couldn't do much to them either, but if things went south, he could vanish into the earth. Mirko's Hatsu, Mole's underground paradise. A conjuration/emission type Nen ability. Covers the user, or another target, in a Nen barrier, allowing them to merge with the earth and tunnel freely. Constraint 1, when using the ability, the user enters a state equivalent to Zetsu, absolute aura suppression. Constraint 2, to bring someone else underground, the user must negate their aura to force them into Zetsu using the teleportation barrier. Meanwhile, Chaos stood silently, scanning the terrain. He didn't know which direction Moken would approach from, so he watched every angle, waiting to activate his hunting field at the perfect moment. Based on the Nen ability he sensed underground, Chaos suspected someone was lurking near Eliza. It was obvious. She was the target. There was no way a strategist like the glasses-wearing Sith would leave her unmonitored. If I were him, I'd assign a weak combatant to watch Eliza. It's the safest call. The fact that this underground lurker hadn't acted only confirmed his weak combat potential, probably around Moken's level, if not weaker. If he were stronger, Sith would have ordered him to take Eliza directly. Too bad. Chaos thought coldly, fate wasn't on your side. He didn't expect to win, but he had, and now he planned to fully enjoy the rewards. He quieted his thoughts and focused. His goal: gain visual confirmation, then launch his hunting field to locate and strike Mirko. It was a gamble, but one Chaos was ready for. Maybe Mirko would run once he noticed the battle had ended. Or maybe he'd blindly obey orders and walk into a trap. Either way, Chaos wouldn't miss his chance. In the distance, he could feel the steady Nen signatures of Tulu and Gliss. He didn't even need his Hatsu to sense them, he could feel them. That perception wasn't unique to Chaos. Many Nen masters could instinctively sense familiar auras if they weren't suppressing them with Zetsu. But Chaos, even though he wasn't a true master yet, had pushed that talent to unnatural levels. For others, this might be the end goal. For Chaos, it was only the beginning. If his instincts developed further, he might one day sense anything, anywhere, in real time. Far-fetched? Maybe. But his current ability was already proof of his potential. Right now, that keen awareness picked up something else. A new aura. It wasn't familiar. But it was massive. Blazing like a beacon in the night. Boom. A wave of overwhelming Nen slammed into Chaos's senses. His eyes snapped up, sharp, focused. A green light, like a falling meteor, streaked toward him from the sky. Ren. His aura erupted in golden flame. He didn't hesitate. Chaos flicked his wrist. A flying knife slipped from his sleeve, gripped tight in his palm. His body shimmered with a crystal-like glow, his transformation Taipatsu activating fully. His entire form became wreathed in sharpened Nen. A golden crescent slash, dozens of meters wide, swept into the air. The shadowless divine sword had been unleashed. Chapter 73. The golden slash expanded in his vision, and Roll smiled with amusement. Without moving a muscle, visible Nen surged from every part of his body. He didn't bother dodging, he simply crushed the attack with overwhelming aura. In an instant, the golden crescent strike dissolved into scattered Nen particles, and Roll rushed forward, even faster than before. Impossible. Chaos clenched his teeth, his chest tightening in disbelief. He had just poured all his energy into that attack, yet this man had neutralized it effortlessly. The raw strength on display left even him stunned. In the next breath, a violent wind whipped against Chaos's face. Roll had already closed the distance. Clothes rippled. Hair snapped in the wind. The moment snapped Chaos back to his senses. Ren. Golden flames of aura erupted from his body as he dropped into a defensive stance. Hovering just meters above, Roll remained aloft with massive green Nen wings extending from his back, looking down at Chaos with relaxed curiosity. The flame around Chaos burned with unwavering resolve. That will, sharp and immovable, radiated from every flicker of his aura. Interesting. Roll thought sincerely, entertained by the tenacity burning in front of him. Whatever came next, this warm-up would be worth his time. Chaos, meanwhile, still had no idea what Roll was thinking. But he knew one thing. If I attack now, I'll die. That wasn't fear, it was an objective conclusion based on the power he'd just seen. But Roll hadn't made a move yet. Which meant there was still a sliver of a chance. Chaos didn't know Roll's intentions, but the fact that he hadn't attacked immediately, that he hadn't erased him instantly, meant he might be open to something else. Talk first. That tiny window gave Chaos a foothold. Even in this hopeless position, he'd never been the type to surrender without a fight. Golden Nen continued to blaze around him as he faced his opponent. Old man. Is there something you want from me? Chaos's voice was polite, controlled, measured carefully for the moment. That entire exchange of thoughts had taken only a second. In response, Roll tilted his head and smiled like a teacher pleased with a sharp student. You're calm. That's rare. But before Chaos could respond, Roll's tone shifted. Too bad you're not going to want to do what I need. He wants to kill me. That's what he means. There wasn't much room for interpretation. Chaos could read it in his tone, his smile. He enjoys killing people. For him, this is entertainment. Chaos tightened his grip on the dagger in his hand, his expression sharpening into stillness. He didn't bother replying. Instead, he focused completely on Roll, calmly maintaining his Ren. Just from the earlier display, he could estimate Roll's Nen output. It was at least 4 times his own, and likely not even his full strength. The difference was staggering. So Chaos didn't speak. He didn't act. Silence was his message. He would not beg, and he would not provoke. Holding Ren at full capacity burned energy fast, but Chaos knew this was the only option. If he dropped it, he'd die instantly. Resistance was dignity. And dignity was everything. 2 seconds. That's how long he gave himself before he'd act. If Roll didn't make a move by then, he'd look for a chance to attack, however slim. But Roll didn't act aggressively. Instead, he smiled as if confirming Chaos's instincts. You understand now, don't you? Even if you wanted to help me, you wouldn't be able to. He was talking about suicide. Chaos understood immediately. That confirmed it. This guy had an ability, a Hatsu, that required his opponent to be alive when it activated. But why talk so much? Just when Chaos was turning over the possibilities, Roll spoke again. Now that you've witnessed my power and heard my intent, die gloriously. Ability. Chaos's eyes narrowed. Something clicked. He has to reveal his Hatsu to the opponent for it to work. What do you mean? Chaos asked in a low, steady voice. No panic. No bluffing. Exactly what I said, Roll replied smoothly. Chaos exhaled slowly, and dropped his Ren. So it's like that. Roll raised an eyebrow. You're not afraid I'm bluffing? No. You clearly enjoy showing off. From our brief interaction, I can tell you're the type who needs people to know how amazing your abilities are. It's likely your Nen requires disclosure to activate. You had multiple chances to kill me and didn't, meaning you can't until the conditions are met. Of course, if I'm wrong, Chaos added inwardly, I'll just die here anyway. Good analysis. Roll clapped lightly, condescending but amused. Chaos ignored it. He turned on his headset. Old man. Take Tulu and Gliss and run. As far as you can. There's a powerful enemy we can't deal with. Even if he was going to die, someone should live. That was Chaos's only thought now. With his free hand, he removed the stalk of wheat from his ear, crushed it between his fingers, and let the fragments fall to the cracked earth below. The signal was given. Now it begins. Chapter 74. Being clear-headed before death. I guess that's a decent way to go. In the calm stillness of his thoughts, this strange line surfaced in Chaos's mind. He shook his head slightly, brushing it away. Instead, he focused on what kind of Nen ability he could develop before dying. There was no doubt, this was a desperate situation. His only hope was to force the development of a powerful ability at the cost of his life. Like when Gon sacrificed everything to beat Neferpitou. If he expanded beyond the logic of this world, he could think of similar limit break systems from other genres. King Fist, One Sword Asura, 8 Gates, they all served the same purpose. Chaos was deep in thought, and Roll didn't interrupt him. Though he had promised to kill Chaos after explaining his ability, he didn't seem to be in any rush. Watching Chaos quietly plot filled him with perverse amusement. It's pointless, Roll said playfully. They won't escape. He smirked. You understand, don't you? Once I target them, no one survives. This line, which would have been necessary later due to the constraints of his Hatsu, was instead delivered early, just to see how the calm young man would react. Chaos's reply was detached. Maybe. His voice was steady. Disinterested. It was a deliberate dismissal. He had already done what he could. Letting someone escape, that was enough for his conscience. As Chaos looked coldly at Roll, he added. If you survive, that is. In that moment, he had thought of a method, something that could work. Combining memory, Nen system logic, and the fundamental power of restrictions in vowels, he realized something. If he sacrificed everything, his potential could surge exponentially. His emission-type ability, the Divine Shadowless Blade, resonated with this resolve. He had initially assumed he could only injure Roll at best. That was underestimating himself. When he spoke again, his tone was cold and unwavering. The change made Roll's smile falter. He's not bluffing. The old man narrowed his eyes. Could he actually have a trump card? Had he used a vow to strengthen himself? Roll assumed Chaos's ability was some advanced form of his blade technique, just manipulation and refinement of raw Nen. But now, kill him? The thought flickered through Roll's mind. But if he acted now, everything he had carefully orchestrated would be wasted. His Hatsu depended on very specific conditions. If he killed Chaos before activating it, all of it, gone. And worse, it would look like he'd backed down from this younger, defiant opponent. That, more than anything, was unacceptable. Even if I lose a third of my aura after acquiring the ability, it'll be worth it. He let the murderous intent dissipate. Chaos immediately felt the shift and dropped his Ren, returning to Zetsu. He didn't act on it, but that gesture told Roll something important. This kid is sharp. Roll realized he couldn't catch Chaos off guard. Even though he could still crush him in a frontal fight, this would likely become a battle of attrition, long and ugly. But he didn't care. He had made his decision. Roll's Hatsu, the mastermind. Effect, temporarily acquire the strongest Nen ability of the winning side from a planned battle between multiple Nen users. Conditions. Roll must orchestrate a battle between at least 6 Nen users, excluding himself. He must observe without interference until one side wins. After revealing his role and intentions, he gains the strongest ability of the victors. He cannot know in advance what ability he will receive. He loses 2/3 of his total aura for 1 hour while using the acquired ability. To make it permanent, he must kill the original user before the hour ends. This Hatsu perfectly suited Roll's twisted personality. It fed his performative ego, his malice, and his lust for control. He was a collector of power. After proudly explaining his ability, Roll smirked and said, "If you think you can survive, go ahead and try." And then, he revealed everything. Chaos's immediate reaction was a sharp frown. That's it? He'd expected something terrifying, some overwhelming death trigger. Instead, he weakens himself by 2/3. Chaos glanced at the crushed earpiece in his hand. If I hadn't broken this damn thing to hide Eliza's location, I could have called for help and finished him now. Still, this was good news. Even without developing a new ability, Chaos could probably handle this. He sighed inwardly, reminding himself that surviving at all had already been more than he expected. No need to be greedy. His eyes sharpened. He's dead. Roll continued his speech proudly, unaware that the tide had shifted. Chaos listened patiently, not for information, but because it bought him time. The longer Roll talked, the more time Chaos had to complete his Nen preparations. Neither of them noticed the tiny Nen beast wobbling its way toward Chaos from behind. A little devil, holding a tiny trident, floated shakily through the air. Chapter 75. Eliza. Why was Roll targeting her? The answer lay with her father, a man who had unwittingly betrayed his own daughter. After dealing with his ideological opponent, Sir Shang, considered bringing his daughter along. The entire reason for stepping into the world of combat again was to find a way to cure her condition. Having inherited the leadership of his former employer's family by chance, Sir had learned a great deal in the 10 years since re-emerging into the underworld. Among those revelations was the existence of hunters, individuals with extraordinary abilities. He mobilized all of his remaining influence and issued a commission to every reliable group connected to Nen or the supernatural. His request, a Nen healer capable of curing congenital disorders. The Hunter Association, Thousand Ears Guild, Mercenary Corps, and even the Dark Guild. Sir didn't care whether the group was lawful or criminal. His offer was clear. 50 billion Jenny to anyone who could help, plus generous compensation for even failed attempts. He never disclosed Eliza's name or identity, just the request. It was a standard protocol that should have carried minimal risk. But Roll happened to see it. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was instinct. Either way, the moment Roll noticed that commission, his interest was piqued. A client offering that much money to treat someone meant that person was important. He didn't know about Eliza. He didn't even know who Sir was. But the implication, that someone cared enough to spend 50 billion, was enough. Roll's curiosity turned predatory. Someone important meant Nen potential. Someone important meant leverage. Someone important meant a target. He began to investigate. And once he understood the situation, he used his position as president of the Dark Guild to alter the mission from assist with healing to capture the target alive. This alone would be enough to satisfy one of the prerequisites for his Nen ability, orchestrating a multi-person Nen battle. Roll didn't always betray his own guild members, but when it suited his mood, he didn't hesitate. Knowing that operatives who lived in the shadows would be wary, Roll first approached Remy for a divination and also convinced her to assist him with a performance. This was back on August 15th. Roll didn't arrange for Sith and the others to take the job, that was incidental. But once he saw them in Remy's vision, he knew he didn't need to interfere. The rest unfolded naturally. Remy's divination, true to her reputation, was half real, half misdirection. The red crystal showing minor misfortune was actually a harbinger of death. Remy, knowing Roll had marked the targets, understood that they had no chance of surviving. The second vision confirmed Chaos's group was telling the truth. This surprised both Remy and Roll, who thought the team would easily crush Chaos and his allies. The third was fabricated entirely by Remy to aid Roll's plan. Filling the crystal ball with half aura was child's play for her. With a flat battlefield and nothing to hinder Chaos's abilities, Remy correctly predicted how things would unfold, because diviners ultimately determined the interpretation of their own readings. When Roll explained the cause behind his actions, he didn't mention Remy at all. He didn't need to. His point was simple. Sir issued the commission. Roll manipulated it. That's what led to this. Roll's ability, the mastermind, is based on the premise of belief, idealism. If Roll believes someone knows the origin and function of a power, then that belief manifests reality. He cannot deceive himself. And now that Roll had fulfilled the final condition, explaining the cause of the battle and his role in it, his ability activated. Golden light surged from his body. What the hell? Roll was stunned. The ability he acquired was not what he had expected. Its name. God. Roll had expected to receive a refinement of Chaos's blade technique, maybe enhanced emission or transformation. But the real ability, a Nen beast-linked divine system, shattered those assumptions. He was left in awe. The truth was, although the ability acquired was defined as the strongest on the winning side, that didn't mean Roll could intellectually pick the power. The choice is filtered through his subconscious, using the logic. If Roll had known what all of the abilities truly were, which would he have picked? And thus, he was handed God. Meanwhile, Chaos was watching the events unfold with cold calculation. Nikos, the Nen beast that stored energy, floated shakily toward him. Only when it neared his shoulder did Chaos register it fully. He'd been focused on Roll's explanation of how Eliza had become a target. Lord Chaos, the big guy said you needed help. Nikos drooled happily. Back in the car, he tasted Chaos's aura, sweet, pure, and delicious. In comparison, Roll's Nen was bland. Tasteless. Much needed, Chaos said without hesitation. He turned his gaze toward Roll. Golden light spread behind his eyes. Now that he knew Roll's ability involved stealing, everything made sense. Roll was a scavenger, not a warrior. All his power came from setups, trickery, and subversion. Roughly 1.8x my aura. But clearly limited. Roll looked surprised, delighted even, by the overwhelming power of God. But to Chaos, that surprise meant one thing. This is his full strength. And it's manageable. If he factored in Nikos, there was a real chance of victory without developing anything new. Of course, Chaos still didn't want his Nen to become a simple burst damage tool. He dreamed of becoming a nearly omnipotent god in his own right, an ability refined in both scope and symbolism. But if push came to shove, he would develop it anyway. If I die, everything ends. Chaos's eyes locked on Roll with clarity and resolve. Please, Nikos, he whispered. Yes or tilde. Nikos chirped, wiping drool from his mouth. He spun his little trident in his left hand. And jammed it into Chaos's neck.